All right. All right, we're going to get started at 6:30. I'm going to start with the minutes from the last meeting. Did anyone have any questions or comments? No, there were some people who just weren't here, so.
I'll make a motion to accept.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All of the public comments that we've received have been emailed to everybody. Got those?
I got it, I was away and just got back, so I only submitted them today, but.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's not a problem. They're going to be discussed and passed on to the consultants. And
Our policy's been those that were online up to a certain date so that
Right.
there was a time to
any
Right,
last minute
accumulate them.
submissions, yeah, get passed on. All right. So today we're going to discuss Chapter 8, the Land Use and Zoning chapter. We're going to discuss the most of the action items for those chapters. We have Noah on just for about 30 minutes. He has another meeting that he has to go to. So if anyone has any questions for the consultant, we can ask them. I know that they just started working on the zoning chapter, and what they're looking for is our feedback on some of the ideas and concepts before they dig in deeper to look for regulations in other towns and things like that. They want to know what direction we want to look in.
Just a quick comment on that first chart. I think it's on page 2. There's a typo you might want to correct. I don't know if you know about it, under the acreage column all the way down to vacant, 3,03. I'm assuming it's 303, about 3,000 something. But
3.95.
Oh, yeah, I see that, yeah.
you might want to just adjust that.
And I think that they're going to look at this, the Shelter Island Development over time map and sort of change it. Noah, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I actually have a couple comments.
Okay.
Because I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend the housing meeting last week, but I did watch the video, so I'm kind of feel like I'm up to speed. And I just had one comment that kind of relates to the zoning chapter. Some of the recommendations in the housing chapter had to do with zoning. And there were some comments that, about where they should go. Should they go in the housing chapter? Should they go in the zoning? And I just kind of wanted to just give everyone an overview of our approach to the organization, because it'll probably come up again in today's meeting. Essentially, the way that we like to do it is there's a zoning chapter up front, which kind of talks more about existing conditions. And then when talking about specific recommendations having to do with zoning, we'll probably address them in the chapter where they're most appropriate. So for example, we'll talk about zoning recommendations in the housing section, but then we also will talk about it in the last chapter, which is the future land use plan and kind of the action agenda, where we get into kind of the nitty details about zoning specifically. So just wanted to kind of clarify that where the zoning recommendations are going to be. Oftentimes they might be in 2 places, and we'll try to make it so that they're not redundant, but we just want to make sure that they're covered in the respective topic areas.
Really?
That's good. Well, I have a really sort of major issue with the way this is all presented, which is it starts off with a statement and a map, the graph land use, that argues that over a third of the island, 35.5%, is preserved or, is protected from development. And based upon this, it really recommends full build out in the other 1,000 acres that represent the vacant parcels, as well as we're not talking about the ADU density. But let's look at the whole question of what is included under open spaces. It includes Sylvester Manor, the part that is not legally protected. It includes Neshomic, which we always hear rumors. I mean, it can be sold off and developed and may very likely be, when the Nature Conservancy decides, that for the acreage here, they can buy 100,000 acres and
Careful, a little more.
Okay, I want to finish.
I know, but
The golf
but it
course.
very well likely will be, is a bad
Wait,
statement.
no, this is.
From the
okay,
get-go.
So I think that we have to talk differently about open space. The golf courses are also developable. So we can't say that it's unlikely, and we can't base our build out upon, and we can't base the argument that we shouldn't conserve so much land on the fact that it looks like over a third of the island is now.
Okay, Lily, where does it say we shouldn't preserve so much land? That I want to see.
Okay, let's.
Does it also recommend?
Where is that? No, let's look at that. Let's look at that.
There's, let's see, several places.
Yeah, thank you.
I marked them. The relatively low density retained, let's see. It's unlikely to change. It's, page 4. I have the printout in front of me. How much of the island has been permanently protected? Okay. But the whole basic argument and structure is, look, folks, we've got a third protected.
We should not mention that?
No, it's not a third. It's not a
So,
third.
Reba, would you like to dispel the Mashomic thing now?
Yeah, so.
Which it is preserved.
It is preserved, it is protected, and it is not being sold. So like,
So it has been placed in the nature preserve
It
system
is
with
in
the town.
the town code
So
91.
even if Mashomic did sell it, it would still be preserved
Well, I
against any
looked up
further
section
development.
91 before, 2 weeks ago, before I went away out of curiosity, and I'm not a lawyer, but it said if a privately owned piece of land wants to come out from the conservancy, it can do so. I think there is some vote of the town board involved. I think it's
I think the
section
community has to vote
91.
on that.
I don't know about that, but it's not so clear that it's forever. Let me find whatever my note is. I mean, I would like that clarified. Code, chapter 91, the town code, nature preserve system. And it says, oh yes, it does say 91, page 12, but I'm not sure that this applies to private property, Sean. It says it requires any change in the use of property in the nature preserve system to be approved by a majority plus 1 vote of the town board and by affirmative vote of the majority of electors in the town. But there's a question whether this would apply to Neshomic.
I think
I'm not sure that it
That
does.
land has been placed into the town's preserve system, so I don't see why it wouldn't.
Yeah.
And that would apply to any of the other preserved land as well, my understanding. Maybe not CPF, but
I am not sure of this, and I've heard, I am not a lawyer.
I've heard similar
You know,
rumors, but-
I've heard some, and so I raised this as a question.
I prefer not to have rumors in the comp plan.
Well, but this is a statement as if it is factual, and I don't know that it's factual. That's all I'm saying. I don't know the status of the,
So we will clarify that Mashomic is in the town's nature preserve system, and we will maybe even put in here, if Noah agrees, maybe even put in here the excerpt from the code and let people make up their own minds as to how protected that is.
well, I think under the code.
I think it's, to my mind, it's protected. I think to most people's minds, it's-
I would just like to know for sure, because I've heard
there's no.
various other things about it. Anyone else?
You're
want-
bringing in like rumor that, oh,
No,
Mashomic
I'm
is
not
for
bringing
sale.
in rumor. I'm bringing in a question of fact. I don't know from reading the town, I'm not a lawyer, but reading the town code, I am not sure that it is, that it is protected. It is, I'm not sure that its status as private property or what kind of property, that it will go through that voting process. That's all I'm
I
saying.
think the question's really on the definition of how you define preserved.
Right.
It seems like you're thinking forever. I'd say maybe there is a way for it to come out of that, but currently it is placed in a preserved status.
However.
Is that forever? It doesn't look like,
Well,
right?
the way in which this is written seems to imply it is unlikely to change, and on that basis, this chapter recommends several things. It says that our current zoning is the conservation of land has driven up housing and private property costs. And it recommends less conservation, more town control over conservation.
Can you go?
Well, I can find yes, I certainly can.
Let's really examine what it says. And try to get a better
Let
balance
me
there.
find several places. Yeah, I mean, this is why I'm concerned about it.
Let's nail this down.
Oh, it says permanently protected as well on page 6, under how the town pays for conservation. And then let's see,
Yes, 200 that's 240 of, Sylvester, 105 acres of the 240 is permanently preserved. I think that's a correct statement.
and then we look at the build-up status map is on page 10.
We're looking for the
And which
same.
says very carefully that it includes these lands even though they are not legally protected, but they are unlikely. And this is, we're looking at a 30-year plan.
Where are you reading that? I'm-
Page 10.
I'm there. I'm looking at,
Under build-out status map, bullet number 3.
3, undeveloped
Bullet
land,
number 2, sorry.
protected land shown in dark gray? No.
It says protected land shown in dark gray. That bullet over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I believe this map is going to be completely redone. NOAA has updated information from the assessors that we just got last week and handed over to him, because there are a lot of vacant parcels on this map that have been developed, especially out in Hay Beach and places like that.
Right.
So this whole map is going to change and get updated.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't dwell on this because, we know that some of this is not accurate.
But
That statement,
And I also wanted to make the other point about challenges, which is on page 12. It's bullet
can
number,
we just stay on 10 and talk about this statement that
well, you asked for where it's.
No, I know. Well, let's stop and talk about this one before we go on to the next one.
Okay, well, it was part of what.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, definitely. So let's just, I think that sentence though there that says, the final, even though these lands are not legally protected because of the goals and policies of the nonprofits, plural, meaning referring back to Mishomikans, that own them, they're unlikely to be developed. There's no guarantee in that statement. I mean,
But the basis of the thrust of the whole chapter is to develop full build out. For example, the 1994.
I didn't read that. That's your,
I think that's our opinion.
yeah, that's an opinion.
It recommends.
No, I don't-
Build out of 1,000.
It doesn't recommend build out. What you have to do is demonstrate what the possible build out
Yeah.
could be should you use existing zoning to its fullest extent
Which to
and
my-
everybody were to build out. Otherwise, you would have no concept of what the worst case scenario would look like.
The argument, that's the argument to conserve more. That to me is the opposite of what you're saying.
I prefer the language of our 1994 plan, which talks about the potential for build-out and open space and gives 3 scenarios or several choices.
yeah.
A full build-out, a modest build-out, and no build-out. And the tone I get here is not supportive of that.
No, it's the scenarios that correct me if I'm wrong, was more about the rate of.
The rate of.
Rate of development, not no development. That's not a possibility. That's just a pie in the sky.
It's my reading.
Rate of development. So that's an interesting, I like the way that analysis in the 1994, and I agree with you that maybe we should talk about that in here as a possibility. But this is just simply, and think about where this comes under, the one that you're mentioning now on page 12. It's a finding. The finding is what the undeveloped land is, but yet developable. That's the finding. That's not
I understand.
what to do, right?
understand exactly what you're saying, but the finding that over a third of the island is protected must be a cautionary finding because it is not permanently protected. And it in its unadulterated form, it can't drive a certain pattern of development versus conservation. We have to be wary. That's all I'm saying, which I didn't get in this text. About challenges, we have current zoning limits overall growth, but promotes a suburban growth pattern. And then we find the last bullet, protecting open space and limiting growth can drive up prices and limit access to all but the wealthy. Now, these are very opinionated summaries of a very certain type of view. I mean, I've taught urban planning for years. It's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily, this is an opinion, not a fact.
Oh, it's a fact.
I can push
Yeah.
back. I might push
Yes,
back on that a little bit. Just that
Yeah.
I think it's. I don't think it's opinion. I think that's it. Kind of comes down to supply and demand. It's pretty much understood as far as a lot of best intentions as far as preserving land does reduce the supply of land for development, and it's simple supply and demand when it comes down to it. You have less land to develop, and so the land that you have is more expensive. And there are a lot of great things that come with open space, but there are consequences, and I think it's important to understand that. That's all that we put in, but it's not. I would say it's not an opinion. I would definitely say this.
But no, isn't it more of a call to action? Yeah, okay, you take out certain developable land, prices go up. But isn't that a call to action for town government to actually do something about building affordable housing? It's not a complete sentence, it's not a complete thought. The way it's cut off leads in a certain direction. It's not an honest sentence.
Well, the direction in which you want to go is entirely subjective, but the fact of the matter
Yeah, exactly, and that's what this is doing. It's subjectively leading us in a certain direction.
But this is still a very rough draft.
Oh, yeah.
That they didn't write.
Yeah.
That's why we're getting the comments
Wrote this.
now.
Really, Meg wrote it.
That's why.
It came from Dodson and Fingers originally.
Right.
Yeah, I
And-
objected to it then, by the way.
And it follows up the bullet point on page 14, top of the page. Strengthen the town's authority to select open space, test open space. So it's raising a lot of issues. About to call it
Give
that.
me an example of that. I was scratching my head on that one.
Or
We're kind of jumping.
Well, it means it means require more.
Sorry.
Require more open space. That's what it means.
Can
Right?
I
But it should be clearer.
can I jump in real quick?
yes, please.
I'm really sorry. I apologize. I do have to leave in 5 or 6 minutes. And so I just wanted to mention two things, and then maybe if there are any specific questions for me, I'll watch the video, of course, so I can kind of keep up to speed. But as was mentioned before with the land use map, we are working to update the data. The data was from the assessor. It needs some work, and I think we've been going through that with BJ and Margaret, just to really look at on parcel by parcel to try and do the best we can. There may be some parcels that still need to be adjusted after that, which we can do, but that'll help us to get a more up-to-date understanding of the land use. And then also we are going to revise some of the maps based on our current data. They don't tell exactly the story I think that should be told. For example, the development over time, that map should be changed. And so we're looking at some other things. We're going to look at details having to do with building coverage and non-conforming lots in various zoning districts. So we're going to get into some more detail about other things that we think should be addressed.
Yeah. So Ben, you You do have a question with that, strengthen the town's authority to select open space land. So, you're required now, we'd like to boost this up, one of the things we should talk about. But right now, if you do a major subdivision, 10% has to be set aside. You get to choose, you, the subdivider, you, the developer. We're saying, this is saying, we, 1994, 2008, Dotson and Finkler, the whole bunch of us, the gang, strengthen the town's authority to be the one to do the selecting of what you're putting aside. That should be a town prerogative, not the developer's prerogative. That's number one. The second part of that is to refuse inappropriate land offer. Like, in other words, oh, here, I want to develop this beautiful piece here, but over here I got this crappy piece. You can have that. That's my 10%. We want to be able to refuse that and say no. And it goes on. This is actually improving open space in the development. There's still a few parcels that really, if they go south on us, will really impact the island. I think we all know what they are, above 10 acres that really could be bought by somebody and developed, and, Nassau County style. So this, is the most important paragraph almost in this chapter.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the premise of it. I think maybe it's just the language.
Yeah,
We can work on it.
yeah, or they will. The consultants, they'll make it clear.
We are going to make all of the recommendations more clear, and hopefully when they come back to you, they'll be fleshed out in a way that's easier to understand, and we'll certainly welcome comments on phrasing if we don't capture it correctly, but we do intend to really put some thought into how the recommendations and everything is worded.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I have a couple of questions about page 10.
Yep, go.
There's a statement on page 10, three-quarters of the way down the page. It talks about Shelter Island was once marked by compact village centers surrounded by open countryside farms and estates. The 1 and 2 acre lots require zoning places that could support them while I read the right spot.
I don't know where you are.
I don't know where I am. I'm lost. Oh, but
10.
I remember the paragraph, but I don't know where it
compact
is.
village centers. I think it's on page 10.
No,
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 page
it's
11.
not.
That's,
Page 10.
9.
Page 9, okay, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm looking at my phone, see,
Yeah.
this weird thing.
Yeah, it's okay. Mine's different.
It alludes to the fact that it's these contact centers, and elsewhere in the plan, it also talks about that's what we want to try and move towards, a compact, walkable center. It's used as some of the language,
Yeah.
and it's also the term that's used on page 13. To have more compact growth and a sense of community center, so compact village look. So I'm concerned about that because it also talks about the way to accomplish this is what we have to get a water supply, and we have to get a sewage treatment district there. And I'm wondering, who decided that that's what we want? Is that what Shelter Islanders want, is a walkable center area? Have we decided that's what we want, or is this just something that was suggested by Dobson and Finkler or other people in the past that we're buying into? I don't sense that people are saying, oh, I want to be able to do this.
I'm sensing it. I get criticized about that all the time.
No, wait, no.
That should be-
Let's look at the reality of this.
Yeah.
We have some issues. Are they going to change? Well, that's really a catch-22 as far as what happens with those.
I think people want a center here that is shoppable, walkable,
Okay.
based on their comments.
We
Yeah.
certainly heard it in the public roundtables back.
What we heard, though, no.
way back when.
What we heard was they don't like the way it is.
No,
And what was
not,
thrown up to them as a possibility was, let's make it a walkable something. We talked about apartments overhead and things like that. So they really are quite different. We can all dream about some pie in the sky thing, but let's go back. You've lived here over the winter time. What's going to survive during the winter as far as a new business in this B1 zone? We have what's going to survive. Anything else, anybody new coming in to build a brand new building on the empty lot that's right across the street here by the library? And between that and the old Feedy's, who is going to invest money in there to build a building for some unknown business that's going to survive over the winter and put apartments on it? Shelter Island has a limited winter business character. I don't think I could be wrong, but I don't think that's going to change overnight. It could gradually as population changes, but I think our winter population would have to probably double before the need for other businesses to show up. Look how many empty business properties there are still. summertime, yay, this is where we
We
should
could
be
have
there.
feedes back. I mean, that would be nice. But also, one of the things mentioned, I thought in here, but I couldn't locate it for you, but that by encouraging apartments above existing stores, never mind new stores, but it could help landlords get through the vacant months. Could help
Understandable.
landlords,
But
you
who's gonna
know.
build a second floor on these existing buildings that are here?
That's not for me to answer.
Structurally, someone say, okay, we don't want to put a second floor in this thing, it may not be structurally feasible, it's a whole different thing.
Right.
The town can make that possibility easier through building code adjustments, that type of thing, but that means over feeds, and it means over the liquor store, and then also over the vet and the pizza place, we might have three
So maybe
apartments.
that's a
Maria's.
challenge.
Pardon me?
Maybe that's a challenge.
Right.
So we say somewhere that it would be nice to have these little walkable centers. However, given the population, seasonal population fluctuations or swings or the lack of, a lot of people here, however we want to say it, in the winter, this has to be tempered, or it has to be, may not be as feasible as we would like it to be. But that to me is a challenge, our wild
And that
swings in
should be there in the
population.
challenges as opposed to being sort of like alluded to, that's
Yes.
our goal.
Yes.
Community goal. I
Again.
don't know if that really is a community.
But it's also this smart growth thing, right? That is the sort of in the zeitgeist that we should, that development should strive to be a little bit more compact where possible, where it's not environmentally degrading, because sprawl is not what we want. We wouldn't mind it to be a little bit more compact. I mean, do you read Michael Shatkin? I mean, that's a constant drumbeat with him.
That's one.
It's one person, no, I get it.
Community wants.
But that's going to be part of when we have our real cleaned up, beautiful, nicely drafted first draft to bring to the public. And I also say, so I'm somebody who lives in the center of town my entire life, 58 years. And so having walkable, getting like you can, so we think saving our global footprint and being greener, you can park and walk to IGA, go get lunch at a restaurant like Maria's or something else that's in town, go to a deli, go to the post office and get to the bank. That's a lot easier to do all of those things and not have to keep driving, down to the deli over here and then back over here and over there. We also have a lot of buildings that, while we say maybe we can build on them, they have a lot of structural problems. They've been around a long time. They might not meet code. We have an aging population. How do we get people in and out of these buildings? I deal with that all the time. I have relatives from who were in their 50s in walkers and canes. I can't get into buildings on Shelter Island. And Joanne knows, we have, people on the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We need to get into our facilities and we can't because we don't have that. So maybe thinking about new buildings in some of these spaces is the way to go.
And I would love to see a little tiny senior development on the empty lot over here. So you have a couple of senior, co-housing, whatever, and they can walk to the library. They can come across to town hall if they need services. They can walk to a couple of businesses, or if they have to get a ride, it's not like going to, Ramblin', yeah. I think that to your point, there is potential to create a more vibrant downtown without huge.
We all don't live in the Heights.
Right.
Some of us live over here and
But it may mean, buying up those other buildings, raising them and creating, adequate.
it might not be in the next 5 years, maybe it's in the next 10 or 15. I think that, that constantly becomes part of what we have to be thinking about. We're planning, right? It's not about just today, it's about tomorrow. And some of these things, yes, we want right now, we need, but it's also about and how do we put a building in and maybe, is there a spot we're gonna put a solar field somewhere, on some town property to help, power the grid.
And Bridge Street, will it be underwater sooner than
underwater, you have
later? And we won't
underwater.
have,
I do have two quick comments. I mean, first, it kind of contradicts itself here, and it says, you know, Shelter Island used to have these compact village centers, and it kind of suggests we need to get back to that. But that's not possible because of the 1 and 2 acre zoning, thus we must go down to half-acre zoning. Well, if we once had it, we had it during much larger zoning than that.
Right.
So it's kind of back to the Dotson and Finkler. That's one of the things I personally did not appreciate about them is there was a lot of forced suggestions, I'll call them, one kind of, you know,
What to do?
built in there.
where was
That,
Sean, that
the
you're?
same thing that John just read.
Oh, okay.
I guess that's page 9, right?
All right.
The zoning overlay
I
district.
remember reading it. It was-
1 2 acre lots are required by
Yeah,
zoning or too
that's
big
right.
to allow for
Right.
walkable centers. Yeah. It talked about, but either way, just an important point as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Will changing the zoning to half-acre zoning make a walkable center? Well, you may get more people there, but what are they going to walk to? Each other's houses? There's, obviously, this is complex, right? Because there's
Yes,
the
very
economic
complex.
development, like how do we bring back a vibrant business sector, which is that business zone? How do we influence that to have the businesses that people can walk to? We have a few, but we've lost a lot of those services.
Ski ones.
And yeah, overall, I think it's a smart idea to reallocate the houses, you know, try to influence over time
have
away
some
from the
sort of-
shore, away from the sensitive areas to, you know, a more central area where there's a more quantity of water and so forth.
But we're not really doing
Right.
that because by promoting ADUs like in the house, all over the island, we're basically turning every 1 acre or 2 acre parcel into doubling the density of the housing units. So
Which
we're
isn't
not
necessarily
really,
bad if it's
I mean, we're
done
not
with a purpose.
reallocating. I'm only saying we're not reallocating it to the center away from the shore.
Not necessarily.
No, that's all I'm saying.
It's not allowed in their shore overlay.
As of now, right, as of now, right.
So just.
There's a hand out there, I think.
Could I say something?
Comments, and right?
We usually wait till.
Okay, I just would like to support what John Kerr said. That, you know, this idea, oh, we're gonna be having high density center and so forth. This is something that should be discussed broadly. There's just a few people who support this. Okay, so maybe you support it. But, you know, before we jump into be making center of Shelter Island to something like Sac Harbor or Greenport, maybe broader community should be involved in discussing whether this is the idea.
We are going to have meetings over the summer.
Could I please finish?
I'm just going to inform
Yes,
you.
but this is already making its way into comprehensive.
It's going to be
plan.
something to talk about then.
No, first you talk about it broadly, not just you, okay? And then
No.
discuss whether this is a good idea or not. but
That's
this
not the
is
way we're
what-
doing it, though.
This is what community is doing, wants to do, okay? And then, you know, there may be lots of people that would disagree with you, BJ.
I know, but then we'll find out this summer and we change the paragraph.
No, you're putting this into a
No.
program.
It's a
And then we're gonna
draft.
have one meeting for the public saying, okay, this is what we're doing, okay? Change. This should be
That's
a
not
broader-
true. So
broader
why do you say the
idea.
false thing? And the other thing that you said that's false is high density. Nobody is talking about high density. We are talking about increased. No, let's use the words carefully. Let's use the words carefully.
As Ben said, this
Increased, a proposal, high, I don't know, it's not defined in your sentence. But increased density to where we would have an apartment over a store
In certain areas.
in certain areas.
Okay, so.
Is that high density? I disagree.
It is.
That's why we hold comments.
Oh, it is.
The density.
Higher, higher.
Increased.
Higher.
I like increased.
Use a gavel. Yeah, I might.
Sorry, Mike.
I might.
Do you have one? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I do. Oh, yeah, I do. That boy. Don't make me use it. So, a lot of the area that you're discussing, this corridor right here, is already half-acre zoning.
Yeah.
So there is no decrease in zoning that would be even possibly feasible or conceptually appropriate, because it's already there. And it's grandfathered. And this is what they mean by there was that dense walkable center, is this section of half-acre zoning, which was historically the market, that's what this area was. So looking at it, it had the appearance of a higher density walkable town center, followed by more of an ag and residential area, because a lot of lots were vacant and hadn't been developed. So now over time, as these lots get developed, what we end up with is that suburban residential pattern where you have 1-2 acre zoning and just houses all scattered throughout, because that's how we've zoned it. And so it goes from this tight center right here on this 114 corridor with some half-acre zoning, half-acre down Jaspa, down Thomas, in this area in particular. And then it broadens to 1 acre zoning and then 2 acre zoning. So that is the pattern that we have established. I don't see much in here screaming to change that. I think a lot of the consideration is, are there things that we want to allow within that zoning? So like the B1 zone and the B zone are two things that come up, because that is this center area. The B1 zone is a restricted zone with the intention of just covering the municipally owned buildings. That's really the whole intention of it. And it's to make sure that the historically park-like center is preserved. That concept of like the historic park-like brick facade, community, municipal area is maintained. And that really is just these buildings. I can pull up the zoning map so people can see it, but it's a very small restricted area. And then you have the B zone, which is kind of our business area that goes down 114. It's a kind of spot zone in certain spots, like where the marinas historically have been, Bridge Street, a strip in the Heights, and that's B zone. That's a little more open, but it's all business, zoned. And those areas have a tendency to be higher density. In the Heights, we know it's higher density because they have water and sewer. So, I don't know that there's a strong argument for downzoning anywhere in here. I think it's more a question of, let's look at what we have and what direction things should go in, and what we should allow in the future and what we shouldn't allow in the future is kind of the conversation that I think we need to be having. So, that's something that, and I agree that I think the concept of having a more walkable, more potentially built up, if you have 2-story buildings instead of 1-story buildings, which 2-story buildings are allowed in center, 2-story buildings are allowed everywhere. They're not restricted. So someone could take, for example, the old Reporter building, the one that has the accountant, a 2nd story on it. If they wanted to put apartments there, they have to get a special permit. It's the only restriction. So you're allowed to do a lot of things in the B zone. You just need a special permit for them. So things that are really not really allowed are like new gas stations within that zone. So it's restrictive, but it's not as restrictive and prohibitive as people think. So that's something that we want to look at and be like, what would we want to promote and what would we not want to promote?
So
That's the conversation.
Not for us to decide, but we should
Yes.
maybe put a bullet saying the decision about what is allowed in the B1 area or B2 area would have to be up for discussion. And it should be identified.
We have to give them
Thank
something
you.
to discuss.
But options. Give options.
Quick, just 2 things I want to, that Jan brought up. First, I think it's a little disingenuous to suggest that, or just realistically, we have been going at this for 3 years now. To say that is just our individual opinions, that's not it. I don't even know how many hundreds of people we've talked through groups. We have put ourselves out there, for the last 3 years, talking to community members. I don't even know how many hundreds of people I've talked to about this. So, when we speak, yes, we have our own opinions on the matter, but it's not like it's only ours and we haven't spoke to a large cross-section. Is it everyone? No, it's not everybody, but it's a lot of people. I mean, if you put together everyone that we've interviewed and that we're trying to represent, you know, it's more than just as individuals. And the other point was this high density. The jump was very quickly made to, it's going to be Sag Harbor. I see it all the time, and it's very disingenuous. It's not possible, and nobody wants that.
Why is that not possible?
Well, this,
You know, population.
what you said, in the first iteration of the CPAP, I'm sorry, I'm sick, I should be, but I wanted to make sure you got more. We did make an effort to get out and talk to people and make a lot of that work. I watched it. In this iteration, though, we haven't, all the work in talking to people has been anecdotal.
Right.
And it would be nice if we somehow can make sure we get to a more scientific, research-based approach.
Yes. Well, it is a little old, but you can't discount those focus groups and those people that talked. I'm not saying, I think they were great, and I think we should do more, and I did see on the schedule, there is plans to do more this summer. I totally agree with you. And I agree that, you know, COVID threw a wrench in everything.
But Sean, some of the surveys and material we gathered was dumped by this iteration for not whatever the reasons. So what wasn't liked was discarded. I remember
Didn't see that.
that warehousing, bit on the hierarchy of 10, you know, there were whole bunches of things that they have not put in. But there was talk of a town center, and a lot of us support.
And there was a lot of people who wanted us to do, like, the next phase that we didn't get to do was to actually have a physical workshop that was 3 days long, where people could come and go through the library to put in their ideas on how we could work on a town center
That was
plan.
so,
And so that's not completely off the table. That's still something that we have to do. We haven't gotten there yet. So what we're trying to do right now is put in our comments, our concerns, our directions, what things we want the consultants to look at in this chapter, so that when they put together a draft, it's reflective of what we're looking for, so that we can then comment on that and we can bring that to the public. This is so rough and so dirty and so hot messy that we need everybody's input in a conversation. I'm embarrassed that I have to show this to people, but I need to in order to get comment.
but I just wanted to say that I think that's important. I think one of the things that's come through that we've mentioned before is the order and process of things. We would, like John was saying, what do people want? That should come before what Ben referred to as, in a way, this is a call to action, the challenges, the findings. You can't say it isn't. It's rough, it's tentative, but it's a call to action all the same. And that's why I think some of us have been concerned about the wording and about the accuracy of the statements. That's all I'm saying. I agree we need participation. I remember when we were going to have our library, you know, our physical workshops with actual drawings and sketches of what we were proposing.
Right, and the reason why those were even going to happen is because people expressed a desire for that. They expressed a desire for a walkable town center, which is why that workshop was even going to happen. So the fact that that concept is incorporated in here is not out of left field, because it was discussed, and that was a planned workshop to discuss exactly how we could create that walkable town center that people were requesting. So the inclusion of it here is not crazy. It's not out of nowhere. So it's a concept that has been brought up as desirable by some members of the public, maybe not all members of the public, but it's something that the public should once again be able to discuss with some ideas and concepts so that they can say yay or nay. We like this, we don't like this. This is a concept that could be cool if we combined it with this or if we left this part out. So our job is to give them those options. So what options would we like to put in here for the public to chew on?
Here's an assessment of where we are now, open space, possible future build-outs, this is where we stand, and then provide, you know, some alternatives.
Right.
Possible.
Yeah.
Possible.
And the CPF is,
Right.
and also with the conservation,
This is very definitive.
with the conservation, the CPF is currently working on its 5 to 10 year acquisition. They update it every 5 years, but it can go longer. And prioritizing what specific lots, even if they're not for sale. I think that's also, I mean, the comp plan doesn't operate in a vacuum. You know, it's part of a government structure, and in this town, a big part of that structure is CPF, in terms of getting these goals accomplished. It's pretty much the only tool we have in the quiver. No, that was a mixed metaphor, wasn't it?
That's okay, we got it. Jan?
Yeah, arrow.
Okay, so you said that this is very rough draft, and you want to hear the comments, but you want action items, I'm assuming. So can we go through those action items in systematic way, one by one, because I have comments to several of them, other people have too. And also, would there be follow-up meetings to discuss further housing and zoning chapters, because they are so interrelated? Or are we gonna go to the marketing sessions right away with revised drafts?
Well, I want to get revised drafts so that we have more information and so that the consultants can take our comments.
No, us, public, we're gonna have follow-up meetings on housing.
You're going to have numerous follow-up meetings on all of it.
And there's,
Yes.
as we keep saying, there's come online and make your comments online as well.
Yes.
The reason I'm talking about
Yeah.
it, because I submitted several comments on the natural environment section. And then I don't know what happened to those comments, were they incorporated into the revised natural environment chapter or not? I haven't
Right.
seen anything. I think everything went to consultants. So I would like to see, like, when we comment on various action items, that it somehow is reflected.
Well, you were here when we discussed your comments for the natural environment chapter, and you watched us include them as the group agreed to them. So they were included, and then it was all sent to the consultants. So
Yes, some of them,
That's,
were, some points were eliminated and so forth. Then the next meeting, you included a whole bunch of new things, which we discussed, and then.
But we didn't
there was
change any of the other work that had been
There was no
done.
conclusion as to, okay, so those are the action items we're agreeing on, and that's what's gonna be sent to consultants to work on. I don't know what was sent to consultants. So that's what I'm asking. Are we gonna go step by step through those action items and then meet again in a month or so to discuss what the revised chapter, or is that you're just gonna send something to consultants?
For the natural environment chapter?
No, for the housing and zoning.
Did housing
Well, we
last.
did housing last week, and so we're doing zoning this week. So once we're done discussing it, we are going to send it to the consultants, and they're going to create the chapter with updated maps. And then we're coming back to the public to discuss it all again,
as a part of a
once
whole
it has
draft.
that rough draft.
May I just ask, since I was not able to come to the last meeting, I saw that there was a discussion on the housing action items. Can we still put comments?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, always.
Good, thank you.
No problem.
And everybody should
Two workshops.
really,
No, the new one, I mean, whatever it's called.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, great. You can always comment.
Great, great.
Okay, let's pull this back in to be a work session.
So I'm going to do what we've been doing. We're going to go through all the action items, item by item, like we've done in the past, so we can comment on them. I'm a little squirrely. So the first action item on the list here is limit the development of pre-existing non-conforming small lots in sensitive shoreline areas. This one, anyone have?
I just want to do that.
That's a really good question. I had the same question, actually.
How do you do that?
I think you can change the zoning to say in the near shore overlay, any piece of property that, let's just say, is not a half acre.
Right.
And there can be exceptions to that if it's a long skinny piece, and so the building would be well away from, there would be ways, but I think that's how, that would be the way you would approach that. And again, this is kind of broad, intentionally so.
Right.
In the past, we actually had planners and zoning people who actually erased property lines and just merged them automatically if they're owned with the same people. And that's been a problem because legally that wasn't really accurate without somebody's permission, but they did it to make it easier. I'm talking 40 years ago.
Right. They merged things
No,
by
not even
operation of law.
20 years ago, John.
So I didn't want to be too embarrassing for people, because Anyway, so it is something that's done in the past.
Yeah. A way to get rid of non-conforming
Right.
small
I
lots.
think it might be helpful if we went through the goals first, just to head to set the
Yes,
right
very
pretext on
good,
everything.
Very
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
I think
Alright.
that's good, Sean.
Kind of set the stage a little bit
Yeah.
on where these action items are trying to accomplish.
So true. Thank you,
We
Sean.
might be here to 10 o'clock, but let's go.
All right. Should I share my,
Just on the first
I'll be in
call,
bed by then.
Yeah.
period after maintain,
Maintained,
Maintained.
period.
period, in doing that, right?
No, get rid of get rid of the rest of it.
Oh,
so let me read
Everything else says, we're only concerned about the interests of those whose livelihood, what about everybody else?
I know, I added,
drawn from other sources.
no, it's the focus. What it reads as is, again, it's tone, it's called, it sets us and them. I added something somewhat humorous at the end of that sentence.
share my
But
screen
whom,
so people on Zoom can see what we're talking about? Okay.
okay,
Yeah, what-
I added a part on that. Okay. That's,
Is it showing up? There it goes.
Just did that strike there.
so you've taken out drawn from other sources. Okay, or undo it.
Period after maintain, just
I added, but whose incomes are drawn from other sources, but whom support the island tax base.
that's just.
Let us, do you see what I mean? Oh, absolutely, because it negates one group and it creates an us and them, which a lot of the chapters, I feel, create a politicized environment of us versus them. You know, it's not nice.
It's always us versus them from the bottom up.
Or take it out. Take it out, you see.
So guide inevitable change so that the most important qualities of Shelter Island are maintained. In doing that, respect the interests of both those whose livelihoods are based on Shelter Island and those whose incomes are drawn from other sources. So first let's define what the important qualities of Shelter Island are. So what is it that we want to preserve? So we have to guide inevitable change that the most important qualities, so that what are we trying to preserve on Shelter Island?
What are we talking?
It goes back to our vision statement in the first chapter, right?
Yeah.
Sort of, it's rural, maritime, right? Isn't that what we kind
All that
of,
stuff.
right? Non-suburban feeling,
Semi-rural,
semi-rural,
community.
all of those, yes.
Historical and cultural importance that we know, I mean, with institutions that celebrate this,
Okay.
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
Livelihoods, just.
Yeah.
Just struck
Period
it.
after
Interest
See,
of
maintained.
that's,
population or
that
respect
sets up
interest of-
us versus
Right.
them
So what I
because,
did instead was I said, guide inevitable change so that the vision statement of Shelter Island is maintained.
good, beautiful, thanks.
I don't know if maintain's the
Thank
right
you.
word, but that's the right sentiment.
Right.
They're gonna clean this all up, so.
It's here, words. Not the best content.
We could go back and look at the challenges
The
because
right sentiment.
you see what the challenges can be rewritten.
Accomplish guidance with as little change as the content of public rules. What?
Accomplish guidance with as little change.
change.
And the content of public rules as is necessary, since many have made commitments in reliance on those
I'm
rules.
not sure what,
I feel like a lot of editing happened here and it got lost in translation.
They talk about the guidance from the first one.
I
Yeah.
don't think we need that. It doesn't say any.
Accomplish that guidance with as little change.
Oh, I understand what it's saying. So what it's saying is don't change the laws too significantly, don't change the code too significantly because
People acted in reliance.
people acted reliance on those.
Or at least be, a way to put that is be cognizant of every zoning change that you make will impact somebody negatively, as well as positively, as a whole, but.
As is necessary. Okay, that's all.
No wordsmithing.
Right. They're gonna see this
Yes.
video and they're gonna know what we're referring to and they're gonna fix it.
Okay. Assure that the island's scarce resources of land and water are not wholly preempted by development in the next generation, but rather so that the potential for growth is reserved for later generations as well.
Good.
That was pulled from the 94 plan. I remember reading
That's
that.
very important, but I can say that water is not mentioned as a concern in zoning at all, and it creeps in here, which is very nice as a goal, the fragile aquifer, the land that we want to preserve, but
But do you like that
consumption
sentence?
is public water.
Lily, do you like that, though? That so that the potential for growth is reserved for later generations?
No, I don't, I wouldn't say that, but that the potential, I don't like that. I would say so that we preserve what we have for later.
Well, you can't assume or make the, I feel like when you say that, Lily, it's coming from a place that no more development is allowed on any parcel on the island.
no.
The people own buildable parcels.
No, I'm not.
So you have to assume there will be some build out.
Of course, I would just stop it after not wholly preempted by development. I put a period. I think that's what we want to say, and I cut out the rest of it.
Maybe generation in the next.
No, I don't think we need it,
Yeah.
but
I understand what they were trying to say is that they want the growth and development to be slow over time. So it's a multi-generational growth and not like one boom of major construction. Historically, we have developed in waves. So after 9/11, boom, big wave of construction. COVID, boom, big wave of construction, and then it tapers off. These events keep triggering construction here. They trigger growth, they trigger development. And it's going to be hard to, predict when the next one might happen.
This is where the zoning comes in to help
well,
influence
that's why zoning should be
what's allowed.
allowed for.
I think that I would agree that what we could pull out of this is in the next generation, but rather so that potential growth is for later generations, just delete that because we can't guarantee that in any fashion, and there's nothing we can do to control that.
That sounds better.
Okay.
The goals have to be attainable in some way.
Yes. And realistic. Selectively preserve open space to provide balance in the island's environment and help accomplish the above goals by the protection of locations of special importance because of their resource value, visual, or historic significance.
I like the first part, the balance, but I have a little concern about protection of locations of special significance. I guess it's general. It could mean as it points out, historic. No.
So this is really a CPF goal. I mean, if we look at it, the preservation of open space is
Okay.
the remit of CPF. So whatever they purchase has to fall under their guidelines.
Those three things,
Those three.
resource value, visual, and historic, that's part of,
It's all fine.
no, I think it's
good.
Would it behoove us to put water in there somewhere?
instead of resource/water or parentheses.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Well, I
You
think,
realize how critical that is.
yeah, but I mean, resources is an umbrella for everything, for your water, for your wetlands, for your kettle holes, for kind of all of that.
I think if, those of us that are here can see that, but I don't know if everyone else.
Put natural resource value.
How integral water is, both fresh and salt,
Right. Resources.
Natural or either natural resource or resources, which do you?
May I mention something else? I wonder, I think it might be good to look at challenges too as we're rewriting, to take out some of the or the words that seem to be objectionable to some people, perhaps.
Yes, I can look that up.
Okay.
All right, so let's look at the challenges, because those are all the goals and objectives that we have. So we're
Right, we
going to
did
go a little
goals and
backwards.
That's right.
Challenges. The first is development of vacant parcels is likely to accelerate over the next decade.
True.
That's the trend we've seen to date. is
Right.
That it has been accelerating.
That's a fact. Right.
Expansion and replacement of smaller homes and subdivision of previously developed parcels are likely to accelerate. As available land is used up, land values rise.
True.
Those are sort of statements of fact.
I would,
I'm not sure if you meld the two somehow, it's kind of the same, two parts of the same thing.
right.
But, we're not wordsmithing.
Right.
Right.
Current zoning limits overall growth, but promotes a suburban growth pattern.
So what's wrong with suburban growth?
No, I really,
There's nothing wrong with it. You're reading into it a negative connotation. It's a description of the current growth pattern that we have.
So why don't we get rid of the word but, you know?
right.
And,
It's
And is.
negative. It really looks negative, really.
And promotes a suburban growth pattern.
Okay.
I mean, do we want a rural growth pattern, or are we gonna have 10-acre zoning, or what?
Well, no, we can't do that. We can't upzone, so this is what we have.
but you know, this is about challenges. I mean,
It's challenges. The other,
Jan, let us keep going
sorry.
here and.
I was just going to say the problem arises, what if, people obviously chose a certain location. They may have chosen originally because of the 1 or the 2 acre zoning. So you've got an interplay between people's wishes and desires, which made them locate in a certain place and put in their money in a certain way, which they wouldn't have. So if you criticize what you're calling, or what we're calling suburban, you're raising a question between what are the values of people and what does our population really want, as opposed to some hypothetical planners.
It's not a
That's all I'm
value
saying.
statement.
Pardon?
It's not a value judgment. It's a description of how the zoning has created the layout of the island at this point. Nobody is criticizing or placing.
Okay, and helps very much. Right, go ahead.
Okay, let's move on.
Lack of public water supply and wastewater systems limit the opportunity for more compact growth patterns. That's a fact.
It's a fact.
This is, why is this,
But that's only based on,
It's true, the question is why.
What else you got we want then?
it doesn't belong
It's
here.
true.
Well, so there may be people who think that we should have more compact growth patterns in certain areas of the island. So this is something that limits that opportunity. It's a statement of fact. The island does not have public water and public wastewater everywhere. It has it in very specific areas.
But we could write 20 challenges and add them to this section that have to do with all the different things.
But this is very zoning specific. I mean,
Right, well,
water
that's why
and
I'm wondering
sewer
about
are very
water in
specific
the
to
zone.
zoning challenges.
That's why I'm wondering about putting water into
How
this
about at the
chapter.
end of this, if you had in certain areas or specific districts, or, I mean, because we're really talking about stuff right behind us.
You're talking about everything other than the Heights and Deering Harbor.
Yeah.
That's the island. I mean, they're very specific areas that have public water. Then really the only one that has public water and public sewer is the Heights. So
If I could, I think, but I think what maybe needs to be added here is, yes, this is fact, the lack of public water with limits for more compact growth patterns. And the zoning, in the event that public water and/or wastewater is available in the future, the challenge is that zoning should not be trumped by the availability of infrastructure.
It will inevitably be trumped. I mean,
That is so dark, I can't even go there. If it's in the comp plan, it won't be trumped if it's in the comp plan.
I don't want to wordsmith, but I think it makes a big difference to limit the opportunity. I think just possibility makes a huge difference.
limits the possibility for more
Yeah.
compact growth.
good.
Yeah.
Possibility, that's a help.
That's more objective statement.
Yeah.
right,
Okay.
I like that.
Thank you, Sean.
All right. The CPF provides a reliable source of conservation funding, but rising values limit its impact. So rising land values, like the
Again.
cost of purchasing.
But is a very negative term here.
And
So and,
But if you, I talked to Fred Thiel yesterday, and he's talking about the beauty of how that whole program was designed, is that as costs and values go up,
you get more
goes up.
money in CPF.
Yeah,
and so
yes,
it does work, and I don't think that's gonna be a problem
yes.
long term.
And it's sitting on 15 million cash, which is not spent. So why are we complaining about it?
it's not 15 million, but that's all right.
How is it?
It's not, it's like 11.
Maybe just,
Unless it's
but
like-
rising values may limit, I don't know, rather than.
Don't even.
Right.
I just have CPF provides a reliable source of conservation funding.
Okay.
Although this is supposed to be challenges, so the challenge to that would be the increasing property value. You know, like your funding, your monies don't go as far when the land costs more.
Well,
So, you know, the intention here, this is the challenges section.
But it creates scarcity.
right, of course,
Back to what Noah
I
said.
mean, look,
Right.
take a
That's the
country
challenge.
that's very
It's a reliable program for
We
preserving
need
open
one person to talk at a time, otherwise people on Zoom cannot hear anything.
Sorry.
No problem. John, you were talking.
Yeah, just what Noah alluded to before. I mean, it does provide a reliable source of conservation. However, it does create scarcity in other
right, it
areas.
does create
That's the
scarcity.
challenge.
Right, that's always the challenge. Was, you get,
I think that's a good
Is there
change.
another word other than reliable?
Renewable?
Much better.
Yeah.
renewable, that's nice.
Yeah.
Very nice, that's a nice
Well,
change.
man, I was counting on the board to support the Deering Harbor lots, and the board
Right.
pulled out of that. So, not reliable for.
I don't think that's public information,
Oh, it is?
just to say.
Sorry. Never mind. Renewable, great word.
And it wasn't accurate what you said.
Well, and CPF will sundown eventually. So then there's that added concept of how do we maintain, 2050, how do we maintain the properties after it sundowns?
It just occurs to me, if we can take out the CPF sentence, because the last sentence mentions it all. Protecting open space and limiting growth can drive up prices and limit access. I wouldn't say to all but the wealthy. Or create scarcity. We could put it together in one sentence if we want to. As the trade-off,
My
rather
suggestion
than,
was to add the call to action for town government to create affordable housing.
no.
In the challenge.
Not in the challenges. I think
that's
No, in
an
the
action.
challenge.
the challenges.
And this last challenge. I forgot what I wrote, but.
So the very last one that
see
we
it.
added was our limited winter population poses a challenge to year-round businesses and the concept of a walkable business, of a walkable town center. Sorry.
Is that new?
Yeah. That's the one that I added when we were all discussing it.
I think that's a good one, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Down to action.
All right, so now I'm going to go down to the action items.
Okay.
All right, so the first one was limit the development of pre-existing, non-conforming, small lots in sensitive shoreline areas. This is something that we can ask the consultants to look into. Have other surrounding towns done something like this? There are a few non-developable lots in certain areas of the island because they are too small, their setbacks overlap, there really is no building envelope. So there are some of those that do exist. Let's see.
Please.
There literally is some that you just can't, like, they can't even get health department approval to build because they can't get well sewer setback.
So we wouldn't have to do anything, but this is actually,
In the wetland.
this is recommending though as an action item that we take a positive action to upzone some lots and say, sorry. That's a significant step to recommend. I just want everybody to sort of dwell on it a minute. You know, you,
Sensitive areas.
yeah,
Previously been able to develop because they were
If you owned that property, you'd be really angry.
yeah.
It sort of would result in like a taking of the property,
Yeah.
which you're really not allowed to do.
Yeah, well, you
I mean-
you can do it, you just have to pay for
Yeah.
Right.
it.
Okay, right. No, you can change zoning. I think you can.
That's-
change zoning.
the whole basis of comprehensive.
Yeah,
plan.
to exclude,
Right. But we have to figure out what all the consequences of that would be.
right,
And financially, what the consequences of that would be.
Yeah.
Because there's more to it than just changing the zoning. Now there's dominoes that are gonna fall.
No, it's very significant.
So it's a
action.
very significant
Thoroughly
action.
and comprehensively
Well,
done.
as a perfect
Yes.
example is this, saying that, with the development of subdivision of larger parcel. If we increase the take from 10 to 30%, we don't owe the developers anything. We have just made that law by changing the zoning. So I think you can actually do this without,
I think I think when
That's
you
why I think
have
it's serious.
significantly larger parcels that are subdividing, then it's a different story than if you have a pre-existing non-conforming small lot that you're then saying you are no longer allowed to on what was previously a buildable lot that you purchased as a buildable lot.
Hey,
That's different. That's a different
Okay.
conversation, I think.
You do? Okay. I think that they're similar in that they're both changing zoning and they're hurting somebody.
They're absolutely similar in those ways.
Yeah.
But I think one is a more significant, one eliminates the opportunity for development on that parcel that you purchased for development. The other one just restricts how much development you can have on that parcel. But you can still. So I think those are sort of significant differences.
Yeah.
Spot where we rely on the consultants to weigh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why I put all those, I said consultant recommendations, I said, does this result in zoning and a potential taking, question mark?
Yeah.
So they can fill us in on how that works.
Yeah.
The next one is consider size, footprint, lot coverage, setbacks, and height restrictions in the definition of SFLA, square foot living area, to establish tighter limits for house size, including criteria for judging variances to the limit. So this is something that the town board has been looking at with regards to the moratorium, and the things that we've been exploring are looking at what all the towns around us are doing. So we've mentioned the concept of proportionality, which is, square foot, what is the ratio? There's a term people use for that.
Yeah.
But I just say proportionality because most people can comprehend that if they don't know the technical term for the floor area ratio, whatever. So the concept is the house has to be proportional to the size of land in which it's being constructed on. So setting limits for that, if you have 1 acre, the maximum house size could be A. If you have 2 acres, the maximum house size would be B. If you have 3 acres, the maximum house size, and then determining, and then the other side of that is how to calculate that SFLA in general. Like, do you go to the interior of the wall, the exterior of the wall? Do you include conditioned space, unconditioned space? Like, there's a lot of things to define in that. And so the town board is currently looking at all the different options with regard to the moratorium and the large house size. But, what ideas and concepts do you think we should consider here? Like, what should we be looking at?
Can I ask?
I think at what other communities are doing, that are trying to limit it, and just see what their experience has been. The most important thing.
Okay. Jan?
Yeah, we do have a town code zoning, for example, on 1 acre lot, one can only build house so big because the side setbacks, front setbacks, back setbacks.
Right.
Coverage.
Percentage of
area, and so
coverage,
forth.
yeah.
So what is the problem we're trying to solve? Is that not sufficient?
Well, so what we have right now is a hard cap at 6,000 square foot home, period. You can't build anything bigger than that, no matter where you live or what you're doing.
Temporary.
Temporary?
That's what, well, there's a moratorium right now, but that's what the town code says.
So that's what this is about, to put some rules, not to build too large houses, right?
Right, guidance
Large houses.
for large homes.
So my
Right.
next follow-up question to this is, I've read somewhere, maybe it was in housing, that there was a proposal to include unfinished basement space in calculation of SFLA. Like, where's the because somebody might illegally convert unfinished basement to finished basement. So in a sense, you're reducing the size of house. So for example, somebody could, under current rule, be eligible to build 4,000 square foot home on 1 acre lot, okay? So all of a sudden you allowing only 2,500 square feet, livable space.
But we might consider raising the overall size, because now we're including all interior space. That might be part of the
Right.
discussion.
So depending on how you define the square footage, the square foot living area, that would impact the size of the home that you would allow, because currently we're not calculating all the square footage of a home. It's just the conditioned living space. So it's not really counting garages, it's not really counting a bunch of other things. If you increase the SFLA to include all of those things, then the overall size of the house that you're restricting would have to increase to accommodate what already exists. And so then maybe the limit wouldn't be 6,000 square feet, but it would be 8,000 square feet, because you're going to assume that there's at least 2,000 square feet that hasn't been accounted in the original calculation, because we've changed the way we calculate. So those are all, it's literally reestablishing that portion of the code is what we're looking at.
But
So,
how can we rely on this? That, okay, so we're gonna increase overall SFLA and then include basement in it? Because this, pretty much, statement like this gives, whoever is town board at the time, carte blanche to basically do as.
no, this is asking us to set limits, to figure out how we should set the limits and
Those
set.
limits are not defined.
Correct, because we need to
It's up to the
discuss
council.
how to establish those and what they should be, what would be appropriate.
Discussion.
I think the concern,
Discussion right now.
This gives carte blanche to town board.
Okay, Lily?
I think the concern
They're the ones that make.
seems to be that by adding
This is the.
garage and.
All right, Lily has, whoa, Lily has the floor.
Taking calls.
I know.
From in-person people. Soon, we're having an opportunity.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, Lily, I didn't hear you.
Sorry.
Say it.
I think the concern is by defining it more closely, we may be actually allowing larger houses to be built, because if we define the square footage in terms, and then feel we have to add the garage or whatever, and get to 8,000 square feet, maybe despite our desire to hold a line on big houses, we're actually permitting large building. That's, I think, what you're trying to say,
Either larger or
which is an
smaller.
interesting question.
We don't know.
Very interesting, how to phrase this.
That's not for us to decide tonight.
You see, if we define it differently, then you actually allow 8,000.
Not sure if this covers it, but we have the nearshore overlay district.
Right.
I guess the bigger question is, should it be the same as everywhere else, or should it be different? Is that going to be covered in here, in this bullet, or we need to create a new one for defining different requirements in the
No, I
nearshore?
like that.
Well, the new.
Because just looking at the just pure resources, what's possible in one area is not necessarily possible.
Right.
And that needs to be taken into consideration when you look at square foot living area and everything else.
Well, the nearshore peninsular overlay district has different zoning restrictions than the rest of the.
Right, is that sufficient? I think it needs to be reevaluated.
Right.
So it should be in this bullet point, and I think it should be consider linking location of the property,
All right,
to size restrictions, or size restrictions to the location of the.
reevaluate the nearshore overlay zone and,
Yeah.
consider, first I'd like to see, increased restrictions in certain areas.
Yeah.
Consider it.
Yeah,
Consider it.
So obviously, it's a
places like
Big
Marquette
action.
Colony, it's sort of a no-brainer.
Right.
I mean, what you're saying would be the logical step.
Right, that's
if you
what,
know you don't have good water, you shouldn't be able to.
Right.
you should be.
Okay, Fred, consider size, footprint, lot coverage, and we could say location,
Good,
setbacks. something
Good,
like-
that's
something
it.
on that. So that's in the mix.
good,
And location.
Yeah.
good. That's easy.
Establish limit.
Okay, so then I'll eliminate this one. Okay, so establish a limit on the size of a knockdown house linking footprint to lot size and the size of house being removed or the relative size of neighboring homes. This one came up in the housing chapter, this concept of, knocking down a 1,200 square foot house and putting up a 5,000 square foot house in its place.
Along Peconic Avenue, I think is where I'm thinking, where you had some Sears houses, cute little houses, and then.
Yes, it's, we see this all the time.
And so I have the question for everyone here, is this horse left the barn? Is this something we should have done, but maybe now?
I kind of think that falls under what I was trying to get at with the nearshore overlay zoning restrictions.
Yeah,
I think if that was tightened up,
right,
there would be at least a limit on,
Right,
some of those properties. And for a good reason.
yeah,
for good reason.
It should only be limited for a good
Right.
reason.
right.
Right. That sounds good.
I think that Silver Beach, Hilo, and South Ferry Hills are all slated for, I mean,
Major.
major, there's a lot of small houses there, ranches, 50s, 60s houses. Those are going to go in a heartbeat.
That'll
Right.
drive it
Right.
halfway there.
That's right, that's right.
Shorewood too.
Right, sure, right. That's right.
I'm not so much Shorewood because that has been developed, but those other three areas are old-fashioned residential areas that I think are going to be prime development target, knockdown targets.
Can I have a question?
No, I don't think it's fair to everybody who's on Zoom. This is supposed to be a working.
And then at the end,
So at the end, we'll take comments from
You're not
everybody.
asking people on Zoom to speak.
They're not supposed to speak until the public is not supposed to speak until the end of the meeting.
So, yeah, I haven't seen it. All right, so let's go on to the next one. Conduct a review of town code interviewing and of town codes, interviewing and soliciting boards and committee members, lawyers, applicants, and citizens to identify areas of code that cause confusion, create delay, ineffective. Consider utilizing outside specialized counsel to review and redraft local code in coordination with the town attorney. So,
this doesn't tie into anything above, does it?
not really.
No?
I mean, a little bit on the moratorium, it is a need. I mean, it is a need.
It gets to,
Right.
we hear it all the time, there's certain codes that are, loopholes, it's not tight enough. I mean, I think that's kind of just a general, it's maybe a challenge needs to be added.
Right.
It'd be good as a
We
challenge.
could make that a challenge.
Challenge, right.
I think if we're going to make it a challenge, which I don't disagree with, I think we need to specify who's going to be doing this job.
Oh, yeah, no, I think,
Our recommendation that we think this should either be a special committee, or it could be, this has got to be one member of the building department, whatever we want to do this, but we should make that,
You're absolutely right.
make that decision. Otherwise, it has no teeth, it's just a pie in the sky to nebulous statement, we don't want
This
that.
might even end up in town government versus
Right,
zoning.
I thought about that too.
They
Yeah.
might, the consultants might find a way how these things, where they're saying certain things,
Right,
they're saying are showing up in different places. It's not just zoning or just housing. There's overlap in these things. And that's why it's going to be really interesting to see how they just take it and merge it all up the right way. And
hopefully.
I mean, how's
we have a lot of,
A lot of faith in it.
it's going to be like, a holiday morning. I can't wait.
how's it being done right now? I mean, I assume the town board is looking at changing code in various places.
we do. I mean, there are some that we know are either unenforceable because of the way they're written, or challenging and confusing for people who try to apply. And those we end up having to address as they come up. We don't have a comprehensive master list of all the issues with the code. And I think it would be great to have a working group or a task force like we did with the
Yeah,
shoreline access.
yeah.
Develop a task force or something like that to go through the town code and take into consideration all the issues that people have.
That should
And then
be in
create a
government.
priority list for addressing them.
That should probably be,
Giant committee, which happens to a lot of things,
Right,
that should probably be in governance,
yeah.
because that's broader than what land use. Also, I think that recommendation should include budgetary, some money, so that once that task force does its work in consulting with a code expert, code expert. Because I don't think you're just talking about land zoning code here.
So I wrote, develop a working group or task force to review town code and establish a list of concerns and regulations that need to be addressed. So that work out some way. The next item, explore the possibility of requiring major subdivisions to commit more than 10% of their land area for open space and to donate one lot for affordable housing.
I think that should be one with, which is strengthen the town's authority to select that open space, you know?
Strengthen, that's,
Strengthen, yeah. So it kind of just follows,
When I was on the planning board, we did that, we would refuse lots oftentimes.
yeah,
We have that ability right now.
right, but strengthen,
Strengthening.
you know, with the explicit thing in any zoning code update. Especially if we're gonna say no more 10%, 30%, or 25%. I think Southhold's 30%, that's where I get that
The
number.
only problem with that is that you would probably limit development entirely because people
That's okay.
are looking at the cost value. Up then you're gonna put $1 million in roads and drainage ditches, and I can't afford to develop it now.
So what's
So
wrong
then
with
they're gonna
that?
come back after the town saying, hey, you've made it impossible for me to develop because you want 30% or you want 25%.
That didn't happen in Southold, but
Well, I'm just saying that this is you're opening up a kettle of fish.
I think it's a good one.
Might be wrong. That 10% has been historically there for a reason. It's not too onerous. I mean, that was considered the make or break decision to develop land. Profit margins are very narrow oftentimes, especially if there's a lot of infrastructure development that goes on.
But couldn't we make the case that the water, the worsening water situation and higher, density of population and development, that 10% is
Not enough.
not enough any longer?
Possibly, it's just, selling it.
I think one of our findings was that development is increasing and has been accelerating over the years. So how much more development do you want to encourage?
Right.
It's finding that balance. Is 10% the right balance right now? As we see development overall is increasing, how do we
Maybe-
slide it to what's,
Making it a little tougher,
Yeah.
maybe not going all the way to 30, but making it a
And
little
it
tougher.
doesn't say.
May not be a,
Just another factor that's mentioned earlier, that they have to donate so much for housing or.
Right.
Yeah,
And there's a problem with that too, is like, for example, what they will oftentimes the developer will then sue the town saying, well, we don't want to do that, we'll just give you money instead. So then you end up, okay, you have a money now being put in your fund for housing, but you've lost the space. So we have to be careful how that works too, and that's what lawyers will do that.
It's here, in other cases insist.
That's a necessary.
It may be a necessary evil, but for example, the Bulva building in Sag Harbor, that was designated to be affordable housing in that building. And the developer said, no way, we're not gonna do that. We'll give you $1 million. And back then, $1 million was like a gob of money. Now it's nothing, but, and so they did that, and they lost the potential of having that downtown space for affordable housing.
yeah,
Right.
that's it.
All right, so these two bullet points, the explore the possibility of requiring major subdivisions to commit more than 10% of their land area for open space and to donate one lot to affordable housing, and the one below it, strengthen the town's authority to select open space land in subdivisions or to refuse inappropriate land offers to satisfy open space requirements. Test proposed open space dedication with subdivisions against the priority system used in CPF, and accept dedication of open space only when it meets criteria for high priority lands. In other cases, insist on developers paying a fee in lieu of dedication. So that covers the dedication of that 10% or more in open space. Should we include, because in the point above, it has the donate one lot for affordable housing. In lieu of donating that one lot, would we also do a fee for development instead? Because not all properties are going to be appropriate for affordable housing, but would we want to, have an in lieu of option?
I would. I think, again, with the affordable housing, when we did all the housing plan work in the fall, it was very much made clear to me that you don't really, affordable housing should be in the center. It should be near services and shops and whatnot. It should be near town centers. I mean, they're doing stuff right near railroad stations now on Long Island. Anyway, not that we have a railroad station, just saying. But so some of this, if you require it and it's not suitable, what have you done? So a payment in lieu of. I've
I
solved
don't know if I agree with that, but I
No?
think it starts speaking of classes. We're saying, oh, we're going to delegate all the people who can't afford or whatever, they're going to be in one spot. And I just
Yeah, I think,
Shelter Island has had a wonderful mixture historically. I don't know if we really want to, if we want to start, what's the nature and culture of truly what Shelter Island is this mixture and getting along with our neighbors, not necessarily excluding people. So I understand your statement, I understand,
Yeah,
I just don't know if we really want to do that. Is that part of what Shelter Island really is?
So you would be in favor of not allowing a fee, just saying if it's explore right?
Like I said before, it's tricky
Yeah.
how that works. Even the sentence there talking about if it's undesirable land, let's say, for example, someone has a kettle hole. They want to give that to the town as an open space. And the town says, wait, well, that's not decent property, it's a kettle hole. The kettle hole is a really important spot for collecting water.
Yeah.
So the argument can be made, hey, what's the deal? So we have to be very careful how that is worded. And I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah. And then I also look at it and I'm like, okay, well, how many major subdivisions do we possibly have left on the island that this could impact? And looking at the numbers, there were really maybe 3 or 4. There's a major subdivision.
I was gonna say, what's the definition of major?
Over 5 acres.
Oh, it's
Or
5, I
you're-
thought it was
Well,
10.
it's, well, you're making 5 lots essentially,
Right.
but it depends on your zoning.
Yeah,
So
but
when we went through it all,
Right.
there was a lot of 2-acre zoning areas that had the possibility for subdivision. So we broke it all down and gave it to the consultant. So when they do the map and give us the numbers back, then we'll know exactly how many actually that would impact. But it did not seem like a huge number. The next one, strengthen the town's authority to select open space land and, we discussed this, right? Okay, I'm gonna go past that. Gain for the town a right of first refusal on key lands in public or semi-public ownership to permanently assure that the public interest is protected in the event of change in ownership. So in my mind, I read this and I think Fisk's Field. Should the school choose to sell Fisk's Field, I think the town would want the first right of refusal on something like that.
Yeah.
But I have trouble thinking of other possibilities.
does it not have the right of first refusal now?
I have no idea. I mean, I would like to think that the school would come to us and ask us if we would like to purchase it, but it's kind of a courtesy. I don't think there's any
There's
law
nothing.
stating.
You know, I love that example. This one worries me. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the greater good of the community.
Right.
But let's say I have a piece of property that I want to sell to, my nephew or something like that. And the town steps in and says, no, you can't have that, we're taking it.
This is public.
So that's why it says.
When you say first right of refusal, what are the stipulations on that?
Well, this is lands in public or semi-public ownership.
So semi-public.
So not private ownership, but in public or semi-public. So like, let's say the fire department decided they wanted to sell off a property. Like, the town would like the option of first refusal. Does that, anybody have a? Yeah, no.
What would be examples? Would Fiskfield be an example?
Yeah, I mean, that's the example I think
School
of.
property, library, the fire department,
Ambulance.
Ambulance buildings.
ambulance
but-
owned by the town now, so to
Right,
speak.
okay.
Goat Hills on Village.
Property that's privately owned, but like a public use, like Michelle Inc.
Shawmick is privately owned.
Yeah.
That's nothing.
It's private, you see, that's why I don't think it,
It's privately owned by a private
right,
corporation.
Right.
But but let me say this, it is so tied up in legal protection because it's donor-based and it's donor-supported and donor-funded by a private, nonprofit. For 43 years, it's never, ever stopped being protected, never shown any reason that it was going to be sold or changed hands. So I think probably got another, I'd say a good 50 to 60 years, it's not going to.
I am so happy to hear that, but let me just say, it's just again, I'm not a lawyer. There were famous trusts established to keep libraries and gifts in museums, and good legal work has broken through so many things. I just represent a question mark.
Meter could drop.
I'm just a question mark.
Yes.
But it's, I'm just gonna, I know it's private. Right.
That's not worth writing.
Public is fine. That's.
All right, so then the next one is explore the creation of a nonprofit Shelter Island Land Trust dedicated to the acquisition of land or rights in land and management of those properties to include community housing. So this one was also in the housing chapter that we discussed last time.
We loved this idea
Yes.
last week.
Pardon? Does it belong here, though? A housing trust is very good because it separates that's the only way you keep everything affordable.
Right.
But doesn't that belong in the why is that in this section?
Okay, so it was originally in this section and we added it to the housing chapter last time because it made sense for it to be there, but I never deleted it from here because it's still a zoning kind of concept, a land use concept.
Okay, whatever.
Okay.
So
Did we,
this won't take the place of other things.
No.
It wouldn't take the place of CPF or take the place of, no.
It's like,
What
you want
about-
community housing, let's buy it in this address.
Because someone could donate an acre to the town.
Right.
We have no way of receiving that land if someone wanted to, right, at this point? If we had the land trust, we would be allowed to, we can take that. I don't think, if we bought that land from Mashomic Estates and Woods, right, we had to purchase that, it was.
Right.
Someone left it to them?
Yeah, so. A land trust would be very helpful.
Right.
Should be in both places, right?
Yeah, I've put in parentheses in the housing chapter. Frame necessary zoning changes to coordinate development with agreed upon concerns such as aquifer, transportation, other infrastructure, quality of life, and protection of natural resources in the environment. That's sort of addressed in the goals and objectives, it's kind of just a feel good, but has no real direction to the statement. I get it, what it's saying, but it's not specifying a direction, it's kind of like the goal is to do
Right.
zoning in this fashion.
You put it up with goals or?
I think it's in the goals.
It's the first goal.
Yeah, okay, so I'm just gonna delete this because it is a goal.
Yeah.
Okay. The second, next one, make second floor apartments obtainable via zoning code, providing year-round income to local businesses. Consider offering favorable property tax incentives to make such apartments affordable. So this circles back to the conversation we had earlier in the meeting. And some people have concern about making that second floor apartment obtainable via zoning code. It's actually technically not prohibited. You just need a special permit to request it.
Didn't we kind of talk about this in the housing chapter also?
Right.
About some opportunities that there were out there.
I just want to raise the question, is there a lot of the housing that is being proposed is not necessarily affordable, like the ADUs. Basically, it's whatever market rent. So is there some notion here that you can control the rent on these things? Everything that is sister and brother and mother are coming under affordable housing. Whereas when you look closely, you find that the rents are almost always market rents. So I'm wondering if one can put a little more teeth into anything.
Yeah, you could. In order to get a second floor apartment right now via the zoning code, you would require a special permit. So you can make that a condition of that permit is that it needs to be an affordable rent apartment. So there are methods for doing that. If you're asking us to add that into the action item to consider making that code, we can do that here too.
And then it's up to enforcement, back to enforcement, right?
Put some language here that is allowed, that we didn't not consider it now, even
Right.
though something that may happen in the future. So maybe just say, including, affordable rentals. Cost-wise.
Or something, just to mention that it could come under the affordable housing. or something like that.
What I think it's kind of saying in here is provide the opportunity for second floor apartments via obtainable zoning, and then considering offering favorable property tax incentives to make those apartments affordable. So it's giving you the right to have that second floor apartment and then an incentive to make it an affordable apartment at an affordable rate. So it kind of covers both.
It should be, yeah, second floor year-round apartments, not Airbnbs.
Right,
Year-round would be as crucial, I would think, as affordable.
year round.
Yeah.
So do we have to mention here those specific districts in which second floor apartments will be permissible? Does it? It's because it's very broad, as it's mentioned here. It's just over the board.
You know, I'm not necessarily, because technically a second floor apartment is an ADU if it's on a residential structure, and you make a second floor apartment, it's an accessory dwelling unit. This is assuming it's a business district or above a business. So that's what makes this different, is that
That'd be a B1 or B.
it would be in the B1 or the B zone.
It says two
So-
local businesses.
Okay.
Is that an assumption we should clarify and just say in the B1?
I'm gonna say, oops, I'm in the wrong spot. If I say make second floor year-round apartment in the B districts obtainable via,
Bullet point where you are right now.
it's in below, right?
She's in the.
I'm still in the
Yeah.
I'm still in the first one. Well, in,
zone.
okay. Okay. And then review current business zones, B1 zones, to revise the business zone to encourage the concentration of local retail units in hamlet areas, including second floor apartments above retail shops. So it's the same concept for recycled. Using shared septic and wells, but with careful consideration of traffic and parking, strong limitations on signs and lighting illumination. Consider the appropriateness of continuing the distinction between the B and B1 business zones, exploring whether compatibility standards would allow merging them, and consider whether the pattern which would result from full development under current zoning is really the pattern which is desired.
I just have a sudden question, maybe you can answer. I'm just thinking about the Heights Business District or and there are many apartments over the stores.
Yes.
So were they illegal before?
No, they were grandfathered.
Grandfathered
They
in.
pre-existed the zoning.
Okay, got it.
And they have water and sewer
Right. And they have the water issue. Yes, I understand that. Okay.
up in the
One's
heights.
at Bridge Street, though.
Bridge Street, yeah, I'm talking about Bridge Street.
Yeah, but those are pre-existing, non-conforming, essentially.
There's really only two that are legal.
Pre-existing.
It's shelter.
So regarding that BB1 zone concept, does anyone have concerns with that? I mean, the B zone
I think
is,
it should be reviewed.
okay.
I think it's good.
Well,
The next one is review current zoning and the amendments proposed for implementation in this plan to assure that the present potential for operating home-based businesses and the resident C district are not diminished, and explore means of broadening opportunities for home-based businesses island-wide, consistent with protection of environmental and quality of life concerns. Review and update the list of qualifying businesses in residential zones, focusing on the potential to real impacts of noise, smell, visual traffic, and inappropriate use for residential zones. I know, it's very confusing. I think this concept came out of COVID, when a lot of people started working from home. Technically, if you're in the C zone and you have a home-based business, no one's supposed to know that you have a home-based business. It's not supposed to look like that. It's supposed to be part of your home. It's not supposed to, have signs out front or, impact the visual qualities of the neighborhood in any fashion, or impact the noise, smell, et cetera. So
I think this is a good recommendation
So
to,
you can't have pigs.
not if you're starting a farming enterprise on your property.
Yeah, they qualify, certain things you are
Just
allowed
checking,
to
John,
do.
just checking.
If you're gonna start a commercial pig farm on your property, that's,
Do it in the business
Done
zone.
before.
do it in the business zone.
Pigs are nice.
They're lovely.
Did we skip over review current business zones B and B1?
No, we just did that. We
The one with, and revise the zone, did sorry, I wanted to comment on using shared septic and wells.
Okay,
I do not want to build in the water proposals into this zoning plan. I think it's dangerous to
Well, I
do
think
so.
we can take out using shared septic and wells and just leave it, but with
Right.
careful consideration of traffic and
Yeah, that would
parking.
be, I'm fine with that.
and the reason I say that is because no matter what,
They have to meet health
Yes.
department standards.
Yeah.
And so us giving suggestions on how to do it doesn't make sense because that may not be a
But you
viable
don't need
option.
to edit. Great, I'm happy with that. Great. Thank you.
no problem.
Can I ask a question though, when I talk about pigs and farms? What zones allowed? Where are they allowed?
You know, I don't know that they're specified in any particular zone as approved or not approved. I think there's a setback to your neighbor's property line. I think it's 40 feet in some cases. But I don't think that
There's a
it's,
setback for how far from the property line those animals can be sheltered.
right.
I mean,
But they're allowed like in C zone, B zone, all of
Yes.
that, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so wherever they're sheltered, if you have a coop or, whatever the animal is, has to be a certain setback, I don't know, off the top of my head, away from the property line. If
They
they
could
can graze
draw on the
or,
property line.
Right.
Or chickens over.
I'm thinking of catching turkeys.
You can cage them, you can have them.
They're so obnoxious.
I think,
I have 68 turkeys that visit my property.
I think they're wonderful, I love them.
They come on my porch, they poop on my porch furniture. They're so funny.
How much more do we have to go?
But I
Oh, we're
have
almost there,
raised
y'all.
pigs on my.
Yes,
You're done.
All right.
Folks.
All right, so coming back to this concept of home-based businesses.
Right.
Currently, the code says if you're in a C district, you can have a home-based business, but no one should see that it's a business. It shouldn't act like a business. It shouldn't increase your need for parking, your density. It shouldn't do any of those things. It's like literally you
Hang a
walk to the
shingle.
office in your home.
Can't have a sign.
Right, can't have signs, can't advertise.
Right, that sounds great.
So, I mean.
I think it should be
This goal
reviewed.
is trying to achieve, I guess is my question.
I think why not have the review of home occupations that are allowed and other accessory uses? I think it's been a while, 05. A lot has happened since 2005. So why not recommend a review? You know what I mean?
That was a problem on the planning board. We were trying to come up with a site plan review for B1 and B. And we felt we really had to have a complete listing of everything that we would allow there.
Right.
And we came up with a list that we felt through our lawyer, that was what we wanted. We presented the board didn't like it, and so it didn't happen.
Yeah.
That was just that board at that time, a different board, politics, whatever. But I think we really do need a specific definition of what is allowed and what is. That's the only way you can really deal with that. If you start just saying general things, it just gets it's pretty messy.
Extensive.
It is.
It is extensive as it is, but we found, like, for example, what happened down at Danny Colgrove's lot down there next to Bert Wade's house, that we all thought, well, it was an empty lot, and then it was a hardware store, and now it's this semi-industrial place.
Throwing dust.
And no one was expecting that, and I think the homeowners weren't expecting it, but we dropped the ball as planners, leaders, and whatever else to try and protect their interests, and that was unfortunate.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that word wasn't in there, because there's no place about storing materials, that type of thing.
And that kind of was one of the things, so I guess Marcel moving up here was the first instance of it, but this call, and then we're getting there, that's, I didn't bring it up, but
Yeah.
talking about an industrial zone.
Right.
Yeah.
Whether that's warranted, or do you just put more restrictions on the current zone?
Yeah.
I guess we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah, I mean, things that are allowed in the C residential district these are permitted principal uses. Of course, residential, single-family dwellings under 6,000 square feet, community service structures, so things that are owned and operated by the town, businesses like the raising of trees, shrubs, plants, and food crops, tilling the soil in general, oystering, clamming, scalloping, fishing in waters within the boundaries of the town, permitted principal uses requiring special permit by zoning board of appeals, two-family dwellings, clubs, private or nonprofit organizations, owner facilities owned, associated with those clubs, riding rings, non-commercial, like for equestrian, educational institutions, nurseries, schools or daycares, cemeteries.
But once you get down to secondary
Yeah,
uses, that's where it's extensive.
And then you get down to permitted accessory uses and permitted business uses. And those business uses include office or professional person of a home business, subject to the requirements of a different section, bed and breakfast, and then home occupations such as offices, carpenters, cabinet makers, painters, furniture and upholstery shops, electricians, radios, television, gunsmithing, plumbing, tinsmithing, jewelry, watches, clocks, and optical good repairs, home laundering, tailoring, dressmaking, hairdressing, jobs, printing, bookbinding, beauty salons, greenhouses, landscaping, public stenography. So there's like a whole list of things.
Boat building is there. That's
Yeah.
very industrial, you know?
Do it in a large garage. I mean,
Yeah.
so.
That should have been allowed in the first place then. I don't see where that falls into.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
residential C.
What, all right.
Yeah. So I think this idea that that it gets reviewed is,
Reviewing it makes.
I think we really made the argument.
My house is in residential C, and I'm not doing any of that stuff.
Why not?
Well, I'm in residential C and I do a lot of those things. But it was
Take my
probably
pickles.
based upon somewhere back in the day, John, and you probably know this, like, they probably looked at all the properties and the people that were
Yeah.
living there and made sure they captured them.
Walter
because-
Brigham on Winthrop had a boat building business.
Yes. So,
And her
And her
hair salon,
hairdresser, right.
salon,
yes.
So that's why it should be reviewed
Well, and
again.
that's also kind of the way businesses evolved on Shelter Island. Not everyone can own a home and purchase a business property.
Yes.
So in order to have your career or your occupation, sometimes it was necessary that you work out of your home because you can't afford to do both. You can't afford a business property and a mortgage, you know? So it kind of developed out of necessity, and that's kind of what makes it charming.
I think of the number of dentists who had offices in their houses, and the doctors, Dr. Ham up there, you know.
Yeah.
Dr. Koenig with the vet, down in Silver Beach, so
So we're going to review it for what purpose?
Ooh.
Just to make sure it's current, accurate, like,
Yeah.
we're looking to make it more stringent, less stringent.
Right, that's.
Well, yeah, maybe.
If we're going to review it, it needs
If, you know, how about this kind of thought, although I don't know that it would go in here, but what I was thinking was, well, I don't think there is anybody building boats, you know, besides CH Marine, in their home anymore, except my husband builds boats, but he doesn't sell them.
because they're not doing it.
You know, do we want to then just take that out? Because it's not depriving anybody right now, or hairdressers,
Why do we have to take it out?
because there's no limit on size there. And how intrusive it could be for your neighbors. In the past, these were always small scale, kind of, you know, it feels like this has changed in some way.
It's interesting.
I don't think it's an issue.
I think the word
I don't know if I would.
think we can change the, diminished is not useful, and we have to talk, I mean, we could say are accurate. That is, they account for what we see happening, and then we have to see if we want to explore means of broadening the category with cautions. And we can just say with caution, appropriate cautions, or, you know, something like that. I mean, just make it clear what we're doing. I think that's what you're saying, make it clear why we're doing it. Actually, what and why.
Well, I guess just to make sure it's current with our new vision.
Accurate, correct.
Right.
And,
I mean, in reality, make
Right.
sure it meets our current goals and objectives.
right, whatever.
Focusing on the potential and real impacts of noise, smell, visual, traffic.
Someone did want to do it. I think you need to, if you're going to take an area away, I think you need to provide another area where they can do it, right?
Right,
I
true.
mean, because essentially what you're then doing.
So if you're saying you
is
can't-
taking that opportunity altogether. you know,
We're trying to encourage
People to
development,
live here and.
business opportunities.
Right.
Like,
So
Right.
don't take away,
Yeah, all right,
Yeah.
you know, until we see some,
yeah.
If they get, employees working there with 3 or 4 cars and those people go out
That's-
in their yard
A good-
having lunch outside or making
Sure.
noise or customer coming and going, I mentioned 1 or 2 cars, I don't know.
Yeah.
People could start
That's-
complaining about that.
then, so then there's an issue of going past, you're breaking then the rules of what goes on within the zone.
Right.
For example, Hay Beach has a deed restriction, which whether they're legal or not is one thing, but you cannot have a commercial vehicle parked visible from the street. So you can't have Joe's Bar and Grill on the side of your van or something. So that's not really enforceable.
right.
Is a deed.
Because I mean, if that's
restriction, but it's-
someone's personal business and maybe that's their work truck and they drive it to and from
Right.
work, I mean, you can't say you can't park your truck in your
So we have to be
driveway.
careful with how we limit things or suggest them.
I don't know if I necessarily feel like there's enough need to open that can. I think there are other cans I'd rather open. People feel that way?
Well, yeah, overall, I think it's important to take in consideration where are people allowed to do what.
Right.
There's certainly a
Right.
limit. I think what BJ is getting at is there is a limit to what is acceptable.
Like if someone's gonna start leather tanning in their
Right.
backyard, that's rather stinky. Like, I don't know if I would be a fan of my neighbor doing that because it's,
But you talk about, the massive dump trucks and everything. There's a lot of noise complaints. There's a lot of issues, wear and tear on
there's a
roads.
lot of wear and tear, yeah.
I do think there's a limit. It needs to be
Yeah.
Right,
taken into consideration.
that's B zone.
That's, you mean, like, that's, I mean, this
Right.
is
Right.
C zoned, which is
Right.
different, like you wouldn't necessarily be able
But
to.
for certain type of activities,
Right.
you could require additional restrictions, whether it's, blockage, visual blockage from the road or additional setbacks from, if you have someone's
Or noise.
dwelling right next to you, maybe you can have an additional setback, depending what the activity is.
Right,
If you're operating, if you're
Right.
spray painting automobiles or trucks,
I think
quite loud.
You either create a light industrial
Light
zone,
industrial.
which issue is where you're gonna put it,
yeah, that's.
or you restrict those activities, until it's somewhat mitigated.
Okay, so we'll leave that because I see the potential there.
Okay.
All right. So the next one, create
An industrial commercial zone separate from the retail business zone whereby warehouses, workshops, storage, and garage facilities can be shared in units with reasonable operating guidelines and codes. So the comment next to it is a good idea, but where? Unfortunately, I think our zoning is set
to the point where it's gonna be very hard to establish a new zone that would incorporate this. Like, we don't have one already established, it's sort of spread out.
Right.
That's why you end up with, Marcelo and Wolf Routine, you end up with
Right.
these spots kind of throughout.
So we take that out.
So I'm thinking we take it out because it's
It's
not
not feasible, it's
not necessarily a feasible thing.
I think before you jump at that, Suffolk County Road Department, I guess it is, there's a spot on Burridge Road that they own a section of land there. Gene Shepherd sort of is added it to his property, but that's owned by them for storage piles of sand and stuff like that. There's another spot like that across from the Eccentric Bagel, which is Lipa Loco. They have a hunk of land there. They have at different times stored all kinds of industrial type things there. So maybe that a deal could be made with Suffolk County. We want that lot. Jay mentioned it last week. We're talking about housing over here at the old town barn area. Yes, great idea, but maybe we need that back part of that to be an industrial. I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying promoting it.
Right.
So there are lots. There are also old sand pits around that were used by the town at different times for extraction of sand. Some of them are separate lots. There's another one on Cartwright Road. It's in Jack Barron's property. It's a cutout there that belongs to the county. So, we could do something. And then there's Peter Larson. in 1993, and I remember Paul Mobius's quote, "We don't need that, Federal will take care of it." And we saw what happened with that. So, but the town could step in. I know Jerry talked about buying that at one time, or expanding the dump, but it could be a industrial zone for us.
But I agree with you, John, like, just because we don't have an aware, it's still like something I think we should keep on there.
Okay.
And
Okay, could we consider then spot zoning? I mean, is that what you're talking about? You know, spot
Yeah, like-
zones that are already,
Instead of create, consider. I mean, rather than, consider.
yeah.
I know at one point in time, North Mananic, intersection with Smith there
Yeah.
was brought up as a possible location. Was that just not feasible, or, I mean, I know it's, one single owner right now.
Where the gun club was, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's limited, the development's limited there anyway,
Right.
due to
So that-
the soil. I don't know, I just knew that was a discussion at one point. I don't know where that
That's
ever
interesting.
I think
ended,
it's
but
changed hands a few times.
yeah.
It's kind of on the table.
But I guess the general idea is, meet somewhere.
Yeah.
But you talk to that owner, what's he doing with it? It's 11 acres. That could be something that could be negotiated with the town. Can CPF money be used for something like that, to buy land
To
for?
make it industrial?
No.
I think the zoning would just change it, and the current owner would still keeps it. It's just now a different
Maybe
zone,
rent out portions of it for.
right? That, well,
Yeah.
guess how, would you then subdivide? Would you have to subdivide it first, or you would have to make that entire lot? I'm going down a rabbit hole that doesn't need to be go down right now, but.
I think that
Rumor has it he has plans for it.
Would
kind of fall under whoever creates that zoning,
Right. I know a common argument is when you're talking about these bigger industrial type vehicles that you see,
Right.
people will say, well, can the road support it? Well, what's a good road? Are you going to put it on a county road? Are you going to put it on a town road? Like, putting it on the state road may make more sense. It's bigger, has more space, but a lot of people will argue the opposite. I don't know what the right answer is, but
Not our decision now, but
certainly not.
allow the option. I think is what we need to do.
Right.
And realizing there are places, it is possible. We just have to have the will.
Yeah.
And importantly, just mitigating it from popping up in the wrong areas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, that's maybe more important.
Right.
I get tired and I start spelling wrong. Thank you, Joanne. Spelling wrong is work.
People on the phone, that's it.
Oh, we're gonna be here.
All right, we have two more.
If public water and sewer are introduced to an area, development will not exceed 4 dwellings per acre. So this was a stream of consciousness that got on here. So the thought was that we should put in restrictions on density should water and sewer be brought to an area. So, for example, if sewer and water are brought to an area, you can't exceed existing density for that area. So if you have, 1 acre zoning, then you have to stick to the standards for 1 acre zoning as established by maybe the Suffolk County regulations or something like that.
Since Suffolk County has those in place and standards, first of all, I think this should be eliminated. Again, we're focusing on public water and sewer, and if that is brought in, then it can be considered. I don't think it should be in this document right now.
Well, I think that this document is meant to look today and 10 years from now, so I don't think that you should ignore the potential for public water and sewer to be brought into a place. So, I mean, if you don't address it at all in the comprehensive plan, then it doesn't mean you're not, it's not going to happen. It just means you haven't addressed it in the comprehensive plan.
It's proactive, and it says Suffolk County standard is in place, so it's repeating the standard, suggesting we use it for Shelter Island, and this is an issue of big debate now. I would just take it out. It doesn't look right in this document. I mean, can vote on it, see who
Loud land use.
who doesn't,
I
but
don't disagree with you, but I think we do need to address this somewhere in this document because the potential is, everybody's very concerned about density.
yes,
Is
but
there must be a way of doing this for helping people's water supplies without changing density or
Right.
in a limited way.
And
There's
this-
gotta be a way of
wait,
making that so that will work.
This is the document for that. This is what will keep your future boards under control,
I
is
understand.
by having that in here.
But
Yes.
The choices here, I'm not sure we can all buy into that.
Oh, no, these choices are.
No, I'm just saying.
And I don't know if it's up to us to make that decision on what those numbers will be.
I think that we should
You just,
have an idea.
Sorry.
do you just add that individually into the current zones that already exist as a stipulation under those zones? Not creating anything new, you're just updating the current zones to say, no matter what, density will not exceed X.
That's really, existing density will not be affected.
Will not exceed,
Right.
or however you want to word
That's
it.
it,
But
but-
the intent is to not let the density spiral out of control.
I understand.
And the intent is to not let fear of density
Right.
prohibit the town from
Right.
bringing potable
But
water
that
to
would do
people.
it. That would do it. This doesn't seem to.
The trend on Shelter Island, or what I've noticed from looking at the numbers when it comes to, square foot of a house on acreage, is that we tend to build things smaller than allowed in our zoning code as a general rule. So, you're allowed, 75%. So let's look at, let me pick a zoning. So A zone, which is your typical residential zoning.
The building is allowed to cover 25% of the lot area, with all impervious surfaces, including buildings, covering 40% of that lot area. Most of the time, I don't know that we cover a full 40% of the lot. But that's by each individual's personal choice. So everyone has this option. So you do public water, public sewer, people are allowed to cover 40% of that lot area. So, without changing any zoning, that would be the standard. So, there may be the perception that we're increasing density when people start building to 40% of their lot, but I think it's more a reflection of the fact that that's not something that people have historically chosen to do.
Could you link it to the number of bathrooms proposed?
Really bedroom.
That would be interesting.
The county calculations are based on bedroom count, because bedroom count indicates occupancy, occupancy indicates flow rate for waste.
But the trouble is the definition of a den, quote unquote, my bedroom.
Right.
No.
So the county does take all that into account when they calculate their flow rate. They assume certain things in that calculation. So that's all accounted for, just because, because people are allowed to have a den and a living room, and not necessarily assume that you're going to have two people living in every single room of the house. And so, it's definitely, I think the concept is correct. Obviously, the wording here doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but we were thinking of things that would trigger increases in zoning without changing the zoning code. And one of those things would be public water and sewer, because then you don't have the setbacks that the county currently sets on you because you have wells and sewer, wells and private wells and septic systems. So.
But if we deal with it like what Sean suggested, by the individual zones that we have already, that might be.
So we could say
appropriate.
something.
Okay.
And it might also help maintain Shelter Island's sense of who we are by having it variable depending upon the zone, as opposed to being just a blanket all over. There's some areas like we have bigger lots, and
Right.
there's more room there.
Where there's 2 acre zoning.
Right.
Yeah. So if we were to say determine options for maintaining current density restrictions by zone, would that
Yeah.
be what we're
that's
looking
good. That's great. That's very direct.
So then we can eliminate this discussion of public infrastructure. I mean, it's,
I think this infrastructure will not be used to override existing zoning.
that works.
Yeah. I mean, I
so
think it should be a pretty strong statement.
If public
That's-
water and sewer are introduced to an area, this infrastructure will not be used to override existing zoning.
Great.
Right?
That sounds
All
good.
right,
I mean,
that's what we were trying to accomplish.
That's nice and clear, very clear. Okay?
without numbers.
Right. Maintains existing zoning standards.
You would agree with that?
Yeah.
I guess so. Are there other comments about it? I'd rather it's left out, but it's certainly more
But
clear.
I think we have to like address it.
Right, I
It
think
could
it-
be coming.
Right. So I think
In 10 years, it's
nice and
Gonna be here sooner
clean,
than that.
and it makes,
I think so too.
it's very clean and makes the point.
All right.
On
Good. All right, this is the last one, and I feel like we might have already,
I think we did.
did I already add this one? Invite members of the town board, committees and boards to identify areas of the code in which their interpretation may not be consistent with the comprehensive plan and can create uncertainty, are contradictory or too vague, or have enforcement difficulties. This review process should be segmented and according to priorities set by those areas generating the most complaints. So this kind of goes with creating a task force to do this process.
So we're going to let the consultants.
Yeah, I'll just leave it here in the consultant.
Is that segment, is there another word for
I know, it's awkward, right?
It's really,
We'll let them do it. Yeah, because we're really getting late and we
Yeah,
want.
let's
we
let
want
them
to
leave it.
Zoom.
I'm just gonna say broken down according to
compartmentalized. It just looks weird, like a worm.
I did broken down according to priority. Okay, how's that? All right, I'm gonna stop my screen share so that I can see everybody and everybody can see everybody. All right, does anyone from the audience have any comments or questions?
Are you still awake?
Have mercy.
Long, patient audience,
Very patient.
very patient.
They stuck with us.
This is long meeting.
Kim?
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, in line with the goals and objectives of the chapter, which is to reevaluate the nearshore overlay district to include and increase restrictions in those areas. Please go to action item number 1, bullet point, and insert after limit the development of pre-existing non-conforming. Have it read, uses, buildings, and lots in the near shore overlay and other sensitive shoreline areas. So that's my first request. Secondly, another bullet point to add into action items. Retain zoning protections for the nearshore overlay district that exist in the zoning code. And you just used that language 1 minute ago at the end of your action items. So I think that should work, including the ban on construction and operation of ADUs.
So Kim, should that include also accessory sleeping quarters on the bigger, on the, for the, more upmarket segment? That ban?
No, I think
Should
the
we be
concept-
recommending that as well? Because I don't see a difference in my mind between an ADU and an
Well, there
accessory
is a
sleeping
difference,
quarter.
PJ. There's
Oh,
a
really?
difference.
In terms of
Because-
actual use?
Actually, there is a difference. One of them doesn't have a kitchen, and you can say, well, people violate that all the time. They're not supposed to, but there is a difference. So I would just propose to retain what's already there and affirm it. It's not too hard.
Wow, maybe that tone could come down just a touch.
Well, you know what? It's going back to what happens to the public here is I've been going to these meetings and waiting for 2 to 2.5 hours to speak. And I do apologize for my tone.
Thanks.
Thank you,
We're not
Ken.
allowed to speak at the time that we have a point to make. So again, sorry about the tone.
DJ, to address your point about you not seeing a difference, isn't one sort of a full-time residence that's used all the time with family living there, and the other one is an occasional used sleeping quarter for overflow on a July weekend?
Maybe it could also be for people who work there. I mean, I'm just saying, if we care about the nearshore overlay and protecting the fragile environment, maybe this is something to consider. And again, the health department, does it care so much about kitchen? I don't know. It cares about bedrooms because that determines flow.
Flow rate.
So I'm throwing it out there. I'm not, I.
Enforcement is really what's lacking here.
Yeah.
That's really.
We have another person on Zoom.
Kathleen?
Hey, guys, 3 comments. Firstly, I would support what was just said about protecting the near shore and getting that into the comprehensive plan as a fundamental protection for wetlands, open spaces, and waterfront areas. Secondly, I'd like to quote from your own housing document and just challenge the assertion made by the consultant and others that CPF lands have contributed to house price increases on Shelter Island. So here's the fact I'd like to share from your own housing document. In the last 20 years, 1,000 residential lots have been developed. And in the last 20 years, we've managed to preserve only 39 CPF funded properties, representing about 1.2% of our total acreage. So if you want to look to cause and effect, it's development that pushes up land prices and housing prices, not land preservation. And the third point I'd like to make is on the comments that were just recently made about spot zoning and industrial districts. I would like to see that not in this text. There's no justification for an industrial zone. I haven't heard one, at least this evening. And secondly, spot zoning, as I'm sure many of you are already aware, is patently considered a bad land use policy. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Anybody else? Pam?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm going to make this pretty short and brief. One of the questions I had was about donating with this 10% and the donating of a lot for affordable housing. You're not specifying what size that lot might be for the affordable housing in that action item there. So I'm just curious, I mean, what size does that have to be? The other thing that's not really mentioned with the discussion about the square foot, the livable space, is you're talking about limited house size, but now let's get back to the conversation about accessory dwelling units, or not accessory dwelling units, accessory structures with sleeping quarters. Here we go. We have an application before the board that there's an accessory structure with sleeping quarters. It only has 2 rooms labeled as bedrooms, and yet it has a great room, a dining room, a den, an office, 3 bathrooms. This is way beyond what accessory structures with sleeping
And this is what we're seeing.
garages were meant to do. So I think that must be addressed in this zoning thing, because this has become a nemesis for the town board. It's an annoyance to neighbors who have to deal with people who want to build these structures. These should be limited in size, and that should be addressed by the town board almost immediately. You did the moratorium on the large houses, but this has not been taken care of, and I'd like to see a discussion of what that building is.
So
And
Pam,
what
Pam, if I can just question you a little bit on that. So are you basically saying this, what I, that if we're going to be strict in the nearshore overlay about ADUs, we should be strict in the nearshore overlay about accessory sleeping quarters? Are you saying that? Are you making that point?
I'm saying you should be strict about accessory buildings with sleeping quarters all over the island. There actually isn't a definition of such a building in the town codes as it stands. So we have a problem with the definition of what a conventional bedroom is. We have contractors who are labeling rooms that absolutely look like bedrooms with bathrooms attached and closets included, but we'll just call it an art studio. Look, it's a bedroom. The town needs to recognize bedrooms the way that Suffolk County recognizes bedrooms. It's time that change occurs, and it should be part of this zoning chapter. Okay, that's a major thing for me.
Okay, thank you.
I thought I had one more thing about this. Oh yeah, and the B zone, the other area where there is a B zone is down by West Neck Road and New York Avenue.
Yes.
Where the tuck shop is and where Leon just moved in, that's also a B zone. And there are houses there that may be able to put a second story on, do some kind of, I don't know, but it's another area that people aren't discussing about where these B zones are. And like you said, they're dotted in certain places on the island. And I think it's going to take a little more investigating on what you're going to allow in those areas going forward.
Right.
But appreciate the discussion. It was a great discussion tonight. I hope you get a chance to read my submission. I'm sorry it was late. I did give you the reason why. And, I'll look forward to the next meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Pam. Lori?
Hi, I just want to reiterate what Pam said and expand on that. I think one of the things that has become problematic, certainly in the last 5 years, is, accessory structures, accessory sleeping or apartment or whatever label you want to call them. There definitely is a difference, number one. And two, there's supposed to be an accessory, which is subordinate to the primary structure. And it's gotten to be the point to the trend where they're no longer subordinate. They are either equal to or equivalent in size to the primary structure. I've seen so many applications that are like that, and there's currently applications in front of the town board or the different committees now. So, I think Pam's right. They're pushing the limits to, okay, it says 2 bedrooms is the maximum, but, when it has a full basement and a laundry room and a den and an office and a dining room and a great room, and, it's like playing the name game of what you're naming the rooms, to get around the town code. And there is no definition, as Pam said, an accessory sleeping. All it does, it says limit 2 bedrooms. Well, they're just giving the rooms different names to get around that. So one of the things that when I worked with the town that the county health department said to me was, I can't believe the town does not have a limit, a maximum limit. You've got a minimum limit on the accessory structure. I don't know why we care about how small they are. We want to encourage them to be small, not larger. That we should be having a maximum size on an accessory structure, and regardless of whether your maximum 6,000 square feet stays where it is or not.
Thank you.
So,
Lori, that's a square.
That's what we've done.
It's a square foot.
All over and they're being built.
Adjusting.
sorry, it's really hard to hear you guys when you all talk at once.
You're saying a square footage limit on accessory properties or accessory structures, square footage, is that what you're saying?
Yes, because if you put a square footage limit on your accessory structure, guess what? You're not going to no longer have unlimited rooms with different names on them anymore, because they're going to be limited to what you can get or build in that amount of space.
That's good.
Do you have a suggestion what number that number should be? Just ballpark, you're not going to be held to it.
Well, if you look at other towns and other places, and including, Martha's Vineyard, where I've done extensive work, in other areas of the country, usually your accessory structure, including Southold, limits, to like 1,200 square feet. They're not very big because it's supposed to be subordinate, not the same size. And even Southold, if you look at their town code, a pool house is limited to 1 room. It can't have more than 1 room. It's supposed to be a pool house. It's not supposed to have a living room and a dining room and all these other rooms, because that's not a pool house.
That's great.
So, I think you should refer to look at some of these other codes and what they've done, because they clearly don't have the same issues we have.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then the
Thank you.
last point that I wanted to make is, I wrote pages and pages of stuff with the last task force. I don't know whatever happened to all my notes and all the things that I recommended. I was surprised to hear one of the previous task force members say they never even saw what I wrote. So it was disturbing to me all these areas in the code that zoning, wetlands, and other areas that, could have been made better. That all that time I spent was somehow just, I don't know if it was just put on a shelf and is collecting dust. No one ever read it, got lost in the shuffle. I don't know.
Lori, those were all in the form of emails?
Yes, it was all in
Okay.
the form of an email.
Okay, all right, well, maybe we can start a search. Yeah.
Well, I'll look back through the archive and I'll check. We have a big box of stuff that was left behind by Dodson and Finkler. So I'll go through that and see if we can find them. They may have printed them as references. So if I can't find them, I'll let you know, or I'll find them and I'll let you know.
Unfortunately, I didn't keep a copy of it because, just like this task force, there was an email link that you were meant to reply to. And, I replied to all these sections and flaws and loopholes in the town code and never heard back from anybody. And like I said, one of those task force members said they never even saw my stuff that I submitted. So where
Okay.
all that went, I don't know.
I'll look for it. I'll see if I can find it.
But, all these things that were tied together and all the problems. And this was based on, experience and seeing all the things, not only the things that came into the building department, but came into the zoning board, the town board for wetlands, the town board for special permits, the planning board. I went to all those meetings. I saw the link in that chain of all these different flaws or loopholes in the town code and strung them all together. and
All right,
wrote it
I
all
will
out.
look and see if I can find it.
That would be valuable.
Yeah, that's.
Really valuable.
Does anybody else have Jan, you have one? Then I'll go back to Pam. I'm just letting everyone go first.
Small comments, regarding to what Lori was saying. My understanding was, at least when I bought my current house many years ago, and I was expanding it a little bit, that the sum of square footage area of the main house and pool house has to be less than 6,000. So in other words, if I build a bigger pool house, then the main house has to be smaller. Is that not the case anymore?
She was
Correct.
addressing the special permit.
So if you did construct something over 6,000 square feet, you would need to go for a special permit.
Oh, okay. So, but since we're gonna limit the house 6,000 square feet, there's no longer an issue, right? I mean, so that,
Well, at the moment, we're having a moratorium because people are applying for special permits to get homes over 6,000 square feet. So, yeah, we're looking to fix that.
all right. And my second comment is regarding the language next to last point. Could we make it very, as strong as possible, such that, for example, say the introduction of public sewer and water will not allow the area to be rezoned, the zones will not change in terms of definition of what could be built there and so on.
Well, I like this I think says exactly the same thing. This infrastructure will not be used, not should, will not be used to override existing zoning,
That's pretty sounds good. That sounds good.
right?
That sounds,
I think it's what you want.
that's good. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
In other words, the effect should be the introduction of public water or sewer has no impact
On the zoning.
zoning, density.
Correct.
Correct.
etc.
Correct.
So if you're doing public sewer and public water, you're bringing it specifically, to fix the water problem, not to
Correct.
business.
Good.
All right, Pam, I see your hands back up.
Yeah, just very quickly, there's also no definition of a pool house in the town code either. So this
Okay.
nonsense, that's another accessory structure on a property that also should be taken into consideration. And I'm just curious about going forward, what your schedule looks like in timing for getting the draft back from the consultants and getting it available to us to look at, and when that public meeting might be later, the workshop and everything, because I know that whole thing has changed.
Yes. So it has changed. The consultants are hoping to have a draft document to us by the end of July. So we're going to try to get together and set a calendar of events for the rest of the season. But I need to sit down with the consultants again and see what their timeline's going to be so that we don't set a meeting date before the document's been available for the public to look at for, at least a week.
Good.
So we will have more coming out in the future.
Is there any way that we could do two parts of it? Whatever they have done now, then have a public session on it. I'm concerned that we're going to run out of summer here.
Yeah.
We have the most number of people here to have access.
Yeah.
And then have to try to cram everything into August, which will drive everybody crazy. So do the first half or do 4 chapters in July. I'm just suggesting.
Yeah.
I think it's a good suggestion.
We'll meet with them and see what they would recommend, what's worked well for them in the past. We do want to meet with all the different homeowners associations, meet with the town committees, meet with different groups to get their input on, what their concerns are, what their needs are for their area. So, we can also do that in the interim while they're working on the draft so that we have that information. So we'll talk to the consultants and see what they think is the best option.
All wonderful and good, but their people on Shelter Island are not represented by an association.
No,
I
they're
agree.
not.
And we're here, and we're here all year round, so we can meet in the fall.
Right. Like earlier, last year, I tried to start an association for all the people who are not in it.
Non-association
And
association.
I didn't get very far because it just wasn't a willing, a lot of these people are the silent minority, I don't know whomever they are, but they're underrepresented, and I don't know how we solve that issue for them, but I really feel that they need to have access.
Right. I agree with you, John.
I don't know how we
Hey,
do
Meg,
it.
just one other quick thing then. Do you want to take a time frame on limits of when you'll take public comment up to now before you send this all to the consultants? Like give us another week or two, by the end of the month or by the 1st of July, we can send you all our comments that we haven't sent in previously so that you can get that to the consultant for his draft by the end of the month?
Yeah, try to send it out
Sound
to us.
reasonable?
Yeah, before the 1st of July would be great. We're going to continue to forward them information as we receive it, but if you'd like to get the bulk of it to us before the 1st of July, that would be wonderful.
Okay, thanks very much.
There's no point where we will stop taking public
That's what I was
comment.
wondering. We should make sure that's well publicized and advertised so people know. July 15th, these links will no longer be available. Please come to our workshop or something like that where people are.
Yeah, we're always going to take public comment on it. We're always going to take it into consideration. We're not going to shut down public input at any point. It's just, for certain phases, it's good to get your information in before we move on to a new step. Kim?
Hi, so I gave some pretty specific requests for drafting of a couple action items. Do you want me to send those to you via email, put them in the rolling comments? Or, yeah, I'm just curious, like how the public's comments are ever getting reflected. Because I've read the 28 pages of them. Some of them are really hard to include. Some of them are very specific. But so far, it doesn't, there's no process of whether they get rejected or included. So I will put them in the rolling comments and also send them to you via email. Is that the best?
Yes. Yep, that works perfectly.
Thank you.
No problem. Lori?
Yeah, I also want to make one other comment, and that is I think we need to consider multiple accessory structures with living space, because that's another loophole that I've seen in the last 2 years, including applications that the town board has recently approved in the last year, where applicants, the ZBA ruled many years ago that you could only have one accessory sleeping or accessory apartment on a lot. But again, the name game is being played where it's, an office with a full bathroom or a studio, an art studio with a full bathroom.
Right.
In addition to another building that has 2 bedrooms so I think that, this multiple accessory structure with a different name needs to be looked at as well, because that's also the thing that people are using to get around the code.
They opened the gate.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. All right, anybody else? No. We make a motion that we adjourn?
Yes, second.
All in favor?